pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. This meeting is being live streamed by Chelmsford Telemedia and posted to the CPS website for interested community members to access and watch. Although we're not allowing for in-person public participation, interested community members were encouraged to submit their names and addresses to Superintendent Lang if they wanted to participate remotely under the public input portion of our meeting. During our public input session, anyone who has joined us through the GoToMeeting platform and expressed an interest in making a comment will be recognized by the superintendent and allowed to speak with the committee. If anyone watching this meeting live has questions or comments to share, they're encouraged to email one of us during the meeting, and we'll read their questions or comments during our second public input session at the end of the meeting. So welcome to this meeting of the Chelmsford School Committee. We have several presentations to start the meeting tonight, so we're going to get started with our first order of business, which is approval of our minutes from our meeting on February 16th. Donna?
Sorry, I'm in deep thought here.
Okay.
I move that we approve the minutes of the meeting from February 16th.
Second.
Okay. Any corrections for the minutes? Okay, all in favor of approval? Aye. Okay, 5-0. Any student reps tonight?
That's right.
Okay. All right, so anyone have any good news they want to share?
I didn't do a big reach out for good news, but I just wanted to let everybody know that we had just worked a little bit on our How to Be an Anti-Racist book group, which is also being done at the admin level as well as the teacher level, and we have already up to 38 teachers that are involved in that book group, so that's really, exciting, and more people are interested in other types of book groups to be available for them as we go along. So I thought that was great, that people are really, looking to get some professional development around this and, make some personal and professional changes.
Okay.
Maria, you had something?
Yeah, I'm going to read this. This is from Mrs. Moriarty in the Table of Plenty. Chelmsford High School adopted the Table of Plenty for the month of February, and we are so grateful. Our shelves were pretty bare after we packed our bags for tonight's grab-and-go meal. Fortunately, we received several large carloads of donations today to replenish our stock. Particular thanks to the Evans, Santos, and Siaka families for opening their homes to collect donations. Thank you to the students, teams, and clubs who participated in this food drive. Many thanks as well to the several families who opted to make a monetary donation through our PayPal account. We are so appreciative of the support from the school community. Thank you. Mary Moriarty, Table of Plenty.
Nice.
It was lovely to see it.
Great. All right, anybody else have any good news? Okay, great. All right, so we're now to our first public input part of our meeting. For those that are speaking tonight, I'd ask you to try to limit your comments to 5 minutes so everyone has an opportunity to speak. Also remember this comment period is for items listed on tonight's agenda. Although we'll not be responding directly to your comments during this part of the meeting, we'll try to address them when we get to the item in the agenda. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Superintendent.
Thank you. Yes, we had two individuals reach out to us prior to the meeting requesting to speak. So the first one is Katie Sullivan. Katie, can you hear me? Okay. You go ahead and unmute, and you're welcome to speak.
Members of the school committee. Oh, wait, am I supposed to give my address? Do you want me to do that?
Yeah, you're supposed to say your name and give an address.
Oh, yes, I forgot about that.
That's okay.
Katie Sullivan, 7 Robinwood Road, Littleton, Massachusetts, 01460. I want to thank the district for having such a thorough plan for bringing students back into the school. We all know that the way we're teaching now is not ideal. The mental health of all our students and staff is a concern in this hybrid/remote schedule. I'm well aware of the demands Desi and Commissioner Riley are putting on all the school districts throughout the Commonwealth, and it's disheartening. Fortunately, the White House announced today that all teachers K through 12 should be vaccinated by the end of March. A huge undertaking, no doubt. Regardless of party affiliation, I'm just relieved that someone in government has stepped up and referred to teachers and school staff as essential workers. What I'm asking of you tonight is, while you discuss the steps to bring students back into the schools, is that you lead with the fact that your staff needs to be vaccinated first and foremost. Throughout your meeting tonight, please remember that every staff member has a family. And with the increase of students, you increase their chances of getting COVID, especially if they're not vaccinated. We are so fortunate that there has been a low to zero transmission of COVID in the schools. Teachers and staff work tirelessly to keep students 6 feet from each other and all the grade levels. While I may not be a math teacher, or a scientist for that matter, I do feel that when you change the variables, you can end up with a different result. 6 feet distancing is working. I hope that Chelmsford can be a model district and show that you can advocate for the well-being of your staff, as well as continue to educate the students during a pandemic. Thank you so much and have a great night.
Thank you, Katie. Our second speaker this evening is Alexandra Bishop. If you would like to, okay, you're unmuted and you're welcome to go ahead and make a statement.
Thank you. Alexandra Bishop, and my address is 3 Lovett Lane in North Chelmsford. I just wrote a little letter I'd like to read. I'm writing to provide my input on the current learning models and plans to move forward in Chelmsford. First of all, a big thank you to all of the administrators, the educators, and all school staff who have continued to keep our students safe and find creative ways to educate our children. As an elementary school teacher myself, I can assure you that none of this has been easy. And from the parent perspective, I continue to be amazed and impressed with all of the hard work that our dedicated teachers continue to put forth. As we look at the COVID positivity rates in the town continue to decrease, the number of cases of COVID in the schools continue to remain low, and watch nearby districts bring students back to the classroom full-time for in-person learning, I ask that Chelmsford also consider offering more in-person learning for our children. In looking ahead at the agenda and slides posted for tonight's school committee meeting, I am thrilled to see there will be discussion of plans to move forward. I understand that an increase in in-person learning comes with a significant amount of planning, the potential to look at reassigning staff, and hours upon hours of reorganizing schedules. I believe that this work is necessary. One of the suggestions I have is for the school committee to poll the Chelmsford community and the teachers regarding their desires for more in-person learning. If only 2 options were on the table, 5 days of in-person learning or full remote learning, perhaps the district would be surprised to see numbers line up. At the very least, I would like to ask the district to look at increasing in-person learning time to meet developmental needs of our youngest learners. Is it possible to move forward as a district and prioritize kindergarteners, first graders? Could we utilize larger spaces in our buildings like the cafeteria, library, and gym if classrooms can't safely bring students back? Although I understand that switching teachers or classrooms at this point in the year is not ideal, if that brings our students back into the classroom, we need to understand that our children are flexible. In closing, I want to reiterate my appreciation again. I completely support the idea of keeping remote learning as an option. I'm not suggesting the school committee make changes that would put teachers and school staff at risk, but let's look at how we can make changes, use our spaces and current mitigation strategies, and keep everyone safe. As long as remote learning remains an option, I do think we owe it to the children of Chelmsford to bring full-time in-person learning to the front of the table. Thank you.
Thank you
Thank you very
much.
much.
Thank you. All right, does anybody have any emails they want to share? I know we had a lot of emails on both sides, supporting bringing students back more and some asking us to be a little bit more cautious. I know there's one email that has a lot of questions about pool testing and vaccination. I don't know if we want to wait till we get to that point in the agenda. They're very specific questions, so if that's seems like it makes sense on that part. So we'll ask Mrs. Troncoso sent a very detailed letter, and so we can try to address those questions when we get there.
If there's, I would just suggest, if there's things that are on the agenda, say like the pool testing and whatnot, if when we get to that point and I go through that phase, if you kind of keep an eye on the questions that were asked, and if something wasn't asked, or if I don't answer it, just remind me, and we can try to address it then. It might just be in context, it might be better.
Rather than do them and forget them, yeah.
Right, or do it now and then have to go back to it and cover it again later.
Yeah, and just suggest that if folks are following and they sent us an email and their question is not answered sufficiently, if they could please email Dennis during the meeting, and he can bring up the question to us towards the end if we don't cover it.
All right, so we'll move on to new business then. We have a couple of presentations.
Sure. Yeah, we've got a couple of presentations tonight that should be really good. So we have joining us South Row Elementary School. We have Principal Dr. Molly McMahon and Jason Ramal, the Assistant Principal. And then we have Katie Sims, our Department Coordinator for Health, Phys Ed. And there's something else that
Family Consumer
Family
Science.
Consumer Science, something else I was forgetting. So they're here today, and what I'm going to do for you is turn it over to Molly, Jason, and Katie. I'm going to I'm going to reduce my screen here, so you may or may not see me, but I'm going to project your presentation up on the board here in the room so the telemedia can pick it up. And I think that's going to avoid some of the snags we had last week with some of the playing of the video within the different slides. So you can go right ahead with your presentation when you're ready, and just tell me when you would like to advance the slide.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate you having us here tonight. As Dr. Lang said, this is both South Row as well as Health, PE, and lots of other titles that Ms. Sims has. But we were excited to collaborate on our presentation tonight because both Mr. Ramallo and I work really closely with Katie in different capacities, both on our SEL district-wide team as well as on our wellness district-wide team. And so we thought it would be nice to make a connection with that. I would also like to first and foremost thank you all for having us, and also thank all of you for your work this year. This has certainly been a year like none other, and our school committee has been extremely supportive of our schools, our staff, our parents, our students, and I just know there's lots of difficult decisions ahead, so we just want to thank you very much for having us and for all your hard work with our schools, so thank you. Dr. Lang, I can't see the presentation yet. Is it up?
It is up. It's just the first slide. So we're on slide number 2, which is the agenda.
Perfect. Now I can see it. Thank you. All right, great. Well, so tonight we thought we'd bring together our SEL and wellness. We certainly at the elementary level have had a lot of success this year academically, despite the challenges. But tonight we thought we'd focus on this as a collaboration with Katie. So tonight we're going to talk a little bit about social emotional learning, the supports and engagement that we've put into place for students this year in these unique models, as well as supports for staff and parents. And then Katie will take over and talk a little bit more of a wider lens from the district on SEL and wellness and the fitness challenge, which we've collaborated on as well. And then we welcome your questions and comments after the presentation. So we thought it might be best to include some videos in the presentation. We thought this platform might be challenging to bring students and staff to. So hopefully you'll enjoy some things from students and staff on the videos as well. So I will start with, Mr. Ramallo always says that it wouldn't be a presentation if I didn't have the triangle. So we started with the triangle. As many of you know, just from past presentations, again, this sort of represents our tiers of support. The green being what we give to all students, whether that's academic curriculum or SEL. The yellow representing sort of what other students may need, can still be general education, but some more supports in place. And of course, the red is, students in need of a lot of supports. What we found this year, the other on here, the other image is our CASEL's 5 competencies. These are the ones that, again, second step reaches for our students. And they, again, are the competencies that really determine success. If students can regulate their emotions, manage them, build relationships, these are sort of the factors that, research is showing actually make students more successful than even IQ or academics. However, obviously academics are still important. But this year, I think what we found in these unique models, our tier 1 and tier 2 team started to meet the first couple of months of school. And of course, we were trying to put lots of supports in place for students, which you'll see tonight. But what we were finding as we kept meeting is that we really needed to provide supports for the adults as well. This is, again, a year like none other. Our teachers are in your homes and your homes are in our classrooms. And, we've asked our teachers to learn quite a bit this year, whether it's technology or academic, or just changing a lot of what they knew of teaching practices. We've asked a lot of parents this year. Again, usually parents' role is helping in homework and monitoring. And, again, we've really asked them to take on a little bit more of a role this year in making sure their students are engaged, turning in assignments. So it's just been quite a year. So I'm going to have Dr. Lang advance to the next slide. And with that said, this is actually a quote I say at the beginning of every year. It's our opening staff meeting. I'm sure if any of my staff are watching, they're laughing. I also did provide this in a newsletter maybe 2 or 3 weeks into the school year for parents to keep in mind as well. So again, just consider the directions of a flight attendant. In the event of an emergency, oxygen masks will fall. And if you're traveling with children, please place the oxygen mask on yourself first, and then and only then place it on the child. So what we found as an SEL team this year, we really needed to give all of the adults the oxygen. And so tonight we're going to talk a little bit about how we converted some of our SEL supports for students, but then also how we've tried our very best to provide supports for parents and for staff. We know it hasn't been perfect. We still know these things are difficult, but we do want to make sure that we highlight all that's happening. And I would be remiss if I didn't say that this work is really not Mr. Ramallo and I. This is our Tier 1 and Tier 2 SEL teams. Our school council has contributed. Our PTO is always supportive. So really, again, all of the things you're going to see tonight are really a collaboration of our community with parents, staff, administration, even students and our student council. With that said, we're going to start first with our student support. So Mr. Ramallo is going to take it away with the supports and engagements we've put in place for students.
Thank you, Dr. McMahon. Yeah, I'm excited to share with you all tonight some of the social emotional supports that we've put in place for our students. As Dr. McMahon said, a lot of this work has been done with our SEL team and just our whole school community from the onset of the summer and even through now. We're continuing to revise and reflect as we go. Our first task was really to look at our current passport system, pre-COVID world, and kind of adapt some of our expectations for students, thinking about hybrid students, thinking about remote students, and also thinking about just the technology and how to be safe with technology and learning. So we had multiple different matrices that we made, one of which is on this slide that really gears towards the technology component. As we were learning, that was really the big piece, and just the expectations to hit home of respect, responsibility, and safety for students. Our reward systems, we tweaked a little bit. We had a Pride ticket system, which we're still continuing. But we adapted that to, which I'll talk about a little bit on the next few slides, on how we adapted it to a Pride shout-out system and just recognizing kids a little bit differently. We're continuing to utilize our Second Step program. We have guidance check-ins and just individual check-ins and small group check-ins with kids as needed. We have jobs and a whole school job still happening and underway. Classroom teachers have done a phenomenal job infusing movement breaks and brain breaks into their classrooms to support some kids that might need some more assistance with their learning spaces at home. There's a picture on this slide as well that shows tri-boards that we've helped families create with just some reminders and some visuals to help students that might be overstimulated at home, whether they're in their room or kitchen or wherever they may be working on remote days. And that's been really helpful for some families. We've modified our sensory path in our building to make sure it's safe for kids to access it and use it. We've also passed on to families a sidewalk chalk system, which hopefully we'll be able to get out there after all the snow melts to utilize a little bit more, where families can make their own sensory path at home. And we're continuing to incorporate calming corners in our classrooms and also giving parents and families the tools to do that at home, as well as power stations. Switching to the next slide, one big piece that our kids love is morning announcements, and really thinking about ways to adapt it so all students can access these announcements were key. So we do them virtually daily. On Monday, our announcements are a little bit longer, where we cover the birthdays, which is a huge, huge thing at the elementary level to hear your birthday announced. We Mondays recognize pride shout-outs for students demonstrating our pride core values, or our respect, responsibility, and safety over the announcements, which they love. And of course, just going over the Pledge of Allegiance and any other announcements that might be pertinent to the week, which has been a hit, and kids are continuing to get involved with announcements as well through Student Council. Moving to the next slide. One other big thing that I just love about South Row is our grade level meeting concept that we do. Both Dr. McMahon and I facilitate monthly meetings with our students. And this used to be in the cafeteria, all in person, where we bring all of the classes together. We've since adapted that to the virtual model, where we record a presentation for students once a month. We focus on our Pride Core Value Initiative, and again, our respect, responsibility, and safety. We infuse our just announcements for the month, our Kind Act. We try to have a Kind Act every month, and Spirit Days every month. And Dr. McMahon usually reads a story. And this year we're really focusing our literature and grade level meetings just around equity and inclusive practices. As we all know, it's very important now more than ever to really be thinking about that. Starting at a very basic to welcoming, to being inclusive, to getting to conversations about race. This month we actually read a story that's called Let's Talk About Race. It's an awesome developmentally appropriate story by Julius Lester that we look forward to sharing with our students in the coming week. So again, really covering those concepts at an appropriate level for them. We also try to challenge our students with something monthly. For example, when we did our kindness challenge, we encouraged students to do something kind throughout the week, and we created a school-wide Jamboard with all of the kind acts from the school, and it was a really nice collage of different things that our students did. And at times at the end of our grade level meeting, we'll have a follow-up activity. So something that the class could do together after the recording, which they engage in at the classroom level or even outside at home. But as switching to the next slide, as Dr. McMahon said, who better to hear from than our students? So on this slide, we have two clips of two different students that talk about grade level meetings. One student is our second grade student, Isabel Ciardi, who's in second grade. And we also have a third grade student, Kenny Brown.
One second. Yeah, just give me 1 second. It kicked me into a different program.
Whole town's watching, no worries.
I know,
Good pressure. Good. No
the
pressure.
PowerPoint link to a Google Google clip. Okay,
There we go.
here we go.
Always the audio.
The audio is killing us, yeah.
You think they can hear at home?
I'm not sure. Mr. Romalo, can you hear at home?
I cannot, not from the screen.
All right, I'm sorry. For some reason, we're not getting the audio.
No problem.
We're going to have to skip that one. Sorry about that.
No problem.
There's 8 of these.
Let me see if I can try the second one.
It had DX over the audio.
It's doing Google again.
Does it bring you to the actual Google one that maybe
Yeah,
will
it brings
go
me to
through
the
the audio?
Google one, but then I have to. Shut that down to bring Google up. Let's try this one. No, I'm sorry, for some reason the audio is not going to work.
Okay, no problem.
Jason, sorry about that. What we will do is make it up to the students a little bit later. I'll figure out a way to get them posted into my weekly newsletter so that we can
Yeah,
at
no
least get
problem.
that out and get people talking. Sorry
That would
about
be
that.
great. Thank you, Dr. Lang.
They both look beautiful.
The kids looked very good. We'll spotlight them in the weekly newsletter just so that people can get the audio with them.
Oh, that will be equally as exciting. Thank you, Dr. Lang.
Okay, we're back on Spirit Day student engagement.
Yeah, no, sounds good. So Spirit Days, again, are another huge thing at the elementary level, very exciting for our kids. And we've tried to do a variety of different Spirit Days, many of which that our student council came up with. For inclusivity, we've been really doing the Spirit Days, the ones that change on Wednesdays, so both remote students and hybrid students can feel included and involved. But we also simultaneously do a Chelmsford and South Row Spirit Day on alternating Mondays and Fridays, so our hybrid students can still feel that they are able to dress up in school spirit throughout various months. We try to do a Spirit Day video, for each one with all of the pictures, which the kids love to see, and we infuse those into grade level meetings. We also try to plug those out on social media, and we found it's really nice to kind of do it that way in the sense of that both hybrid remote families can really feel involved and included in seeing what one another are doing. We can move to the next one. Kind Acts, as I mentioned earlier, we try to do a Kind Act monthly at South Row, and we've really tried to be creative this year with some of our acts and really kind of hitting home to the students that it doesn't have to be necessarily money related, right? So something that you're giving to charities necessarily. It can just be give backs to our community, which we've really tried to infuse this year. We supported Project 300 over at McCarthy as a school. We collaborated with the Wish Project. Our student council ran that, where we gave pajamas towards the winter months towards children in need. Our students wrote wonderful letters to the nursing homes within the Chelmsford community to try to perk up residents in those facilities during these times. The Great Kindness Challenge, as I talked about a little earlier. Currently, our student council is working on cards for our vaccine workers who are working tirelessly to get the vaccines up and running. And right now, which Ms. Sims will talk about a little later, is about our family fitness challenge that we're doing. We're also working with a can drive currently for the Table of Plenty in collaboration with our book fair, and our student council is working on recycling advocacy as well. Probably one of my favorite parts of my job, and I think Dr. McMahon would agree, is our student council. This year it's made up of 4th grade students, both remote and hybrid students that meet once a month and really are a student voice of the building. They provide us feedback, they help us as we discover different kind acts and Spirit Days or different initiatives. We always like to try to start the meeting off with a leadership focus and really encouraging our students to embody positive leadership traits. We do that through a story or a video clip, a quote of each meeting to really get the students thinking about what it means to be a leader at a young age. We, again, have tried to come up with really creative ways to involve them in the school instead of tangible projects. We've tried to really think about some different things that they can do virtually to engage, such as reading to younger grade levels, doing morning announcements, really infusing our Pride Core Value initiative. Again, as I mentioned earlier, the group is very passionate about recycling, so they're looking at ways that we can infuse recycling, positive recycling systems in our school, but also even as a larger community. And they really are, again, our voice, and they have given us some great ideas. Again, the cards to the nursing homes that we did this year, which was a huge hit, came out of student council. So it's really nice that they're able to contribute in a positive manner for our school. I'm going to pass it back to Dr. McMahon, who's going to talk a little bit more about our staff supports that we've put into place.
Thank you, Mr. Romalo. We will obviously thank you, Dr. Lang, for inserting those student videos, but I just wanted to acknowledge that we had a first grader Liana Barowick that did a great presentation, Kenny Brown in third grade, Isabel Ciardi in second grade, Evie Hogner in first grade, and Connor Hannon in fourth grade. And I encourage you to watch those when you get a chance, because I just can't believe how great their presentation skills were. And we didn't prompt them with any scripts, so they just did a fantastic job. So as I said at the beginning, I think one of the things that was different for us this year as SEL PBIS teams is that we realized just, and rightfully so, the amount of supports that we need to put in place for both staff as well as for parents. And so, again, one of the most important things we needed to do was really make sure we had really clear communication. We wanted to make sure everybody felt very confident in the models, the safety procedures, a comprehensive resource guide to start the year. We also wanted to make sure we had venues for staff to ask any and all questions. We also wanted to make sure that staff could feel connected. So as you can see from that triangle, sort of back to our basic needs, we all want to feel connected and have those relationships, and Southborough is a very close staff. So we felt like it was really important that they had ways to connect. So we've done that obviously virtually, but in many different ways. We have an office hour weekly with Mr. Romalo and I. We also have an office hour for just staff to go meet with the guidance counselor if they're concerned about students or anything that's on their mind. We also have a monthly coffee and connect. So we buy the coffee, but we don't go, so that staff can just sort of connect. They can vent, they can talk, and they really enjoy the coffee from KJ's. And then we've also had monthly socials, and these have been a huge hit. So trivia online, we've had a bake night, we've have a paint night coming up. We've actually had 2 trivia nights. So I thank the social committee for putting that together. Mr. Romalo and I also provided in December the gift of time. So we did 30-minute lessons in each classroom so teachers could get a little extra time to themselves. So we really just wanted to make sure that we provided the right supports for adults. So on the next slide, we talk a little bit more too about, obviously these models are really challenging, and I can't say enough about how incredible our staff has been with adapting to so many changes this year. They've really, their knowledge of technology has increased exponentially. Even people that were very strong in technology have learned so many different programs, and just a really big shout out to the tech department for that, because they've really done an incredible job getting the right tools in teachers' hands and then providing the training. So we've, again, made sure that they have PD. Our tech, Eileen Young, does Friday PDs with our staff in the afternoon. You may already know this, but the tech department is available all day Wednesdays, and they run different programs for any help for teachers. And so we really just wanted to make sure people felt confident in the models and with the technology, because it's so key, to these models. We've also launched a team site, a Google team site, so it's a one-stop shop for resources. So if a teacher's looking for anything that has been brought up, a schedule, a PD session, etc., they can go to one place and find everything. We've also wanted to make sure that they've had a lot of time for planning as teams, so we've really encouraged that. We've had data meetings, etc. We've been providing a lot of articles and research, and really trying to make sure that they feel like they can get different ideas. Again, with all these new things that have been expected of them. We've also, during a couple of our PD sessions, been able to do cross-grade level conversations, and obviously with a focus on a certain topic such as assessment, where staff can share. I think a lot of times people share with their own grade level, but especially in this model, it's really hard to connect with other grade levels because you have to do it virtually. So we've been able to get teams across the building to touch base and really share different tools that are working for them, whether it's for engagement or assessment, or just, again, presenting a lesson. And then we've really wanted to give people time for feedback and reflection. So that's been part of those conversations as well, as to what's going well, what they still need support in, and being able to share with one another has been really key. And then in terms of our, I don't think this video will work either, but our video was Jackie Duncan and Beth Matthews. They are our SEL PBIS facilitators. And really, again, a lot of credit goes to them and the team in terms of their thoughts around the supports that needed to be put in place this year to support the adults in order to support the kids. So the parent supports, again, we've really tried to make sure our communication is really clear. We've tried to provide support for technology. We have a very strong PTO and school council that has continued to meet and continue to think through different ideas. Everything has moved virtually, which I think will be very interesting moving forward. We'll see. I think some of this may stay. We've had great attendance rates at parent-teacher conferences, open houses. and our parent discussion nights. And I think, out of the convenience of your home when you don't have to find childcare, is a big contributor to that. So I think it'll be interesting to see what we take away from this time. But one thing that really became sort of a highlight this year was we did do a parent survey, obviously knowing that individual teachers were getting a lot of questions from families, and then teams of teachers were trying to help families. And so we did survey our families and asked what kind of topics they wanted to learn more about in order to support their child best. When we got the results, our SEL team came up with different topics, and we just had parents click on them to see what was the highest rate. And I will say we had one of the highest rates of people actually taking the survey too. So it was a huge number of families that wanted supports and wanted discussion nights. So we did 2 discussion nights. One was on how to support your child's academics and independence, and the other was on supporting your child's social emotional learning at home. We had about 40 families at each night, which was phenomenal, and we got really very nice feedback about it. We've also, of course, for families that need a little bit more support, we've really been trying to provide that. Our guidance counselor, psychologist, myself, Mr. Romalo, BCBA, nurse, we all meet. And so if there's any families that are really looking for resources or need more supports or check-ins, we've really established sort of who is the contact person for those families. So it's, in a really difficult situation, we've tried to do the best that we can. And there's, of course, some visuals here from our parent discussion nights, and this next slide also has some visuals. These are some recordings directly from teachers. So our teachers would take a question like, how do I organize my child's workspace? And they would do a video on it, and we were able to break it down by minutes. So if you're a parent just looking for the answer to one question, you don't have to watch the whole presentation, so that hopefully you can get some tips and tricks on how to support your child at home. So that's it. We did have a parent that was on our SEL committee from the summer planning, Jess Cogswell. Again, I hope you'll check out her video as well. She has some really nice feedback on the year. But at this time, I'm going to pass this over to Katie to give a district perspective.
Thanks so much, Molly and Jason, and thank you very much for having us tonight. I appreciate the time and am happy to share with you some things going on in the district in regard to social emotional learning and wellness, and then specifically my health education, physical education, and family consumer science departments during COVID this year, and some of the unique and fun things that they have done. So first, I will talk a little bit about a grant that we received from the Department of Education this year. It is an SEL grant. The grant was for $10,000. So we were really excited to receive that grant. As part of the grant, we agreed to give a survey to all students in grades 4, 5, 8, and 10. And this survey will give us some good data on where our students are in regards to the SEL competencies that are listed here. So where they are in regards to self-management, self-awareness, responsible decision-making, social awareness, relationship skills, all these things that we have really tried to work hard on and implement into our schools the last few years. So actually tomorrow, grades 5 and 8 will be taking the survey. And then next Wednesday, grades 4 and 10 will be taking the survey. So we're hoping the Department of Education is going to do the data analysis for us, which is exciting, that we don't have to do that part. And they're going to give it to us by grade, by teacher, by student. Build our district MTSS team, our building admin, our SEL and PBIS teams will really be able to dive deeper into that data and then kind of determine next steps and moving forward with our social emotional learning across the curriculum, across the district. And having some money to help support us do that will be nice. So we're looking forward to continuing that work throughout the course of this year and getting that survey and data results in the next few months. So next slide, please. The next thing I wanted to just highlight, and Molly touched upon this a little bit already with some of the things specific to South Row and kind of support in staff wellness. I think all the schools across Chelmsford, the entire district, has done an amazing job at trying to come up with some fun, unique games, activities, just opportunities for staff to build connection and relationships and work on their own personal social emotional health. So as you can see in these pictures, I put a couple of pictures up here of some of the things that have been going on. This is a small snapshot of some of the things in the district, but they've had some different mindfulness activities, paint nights, trivia, bingo. The high school had a staff mini golf event at lunch. They've done some teacher fit, different workouts where the staff has gotten together either during their lunch or after school and gone onto this app that we have as a district and can do the quick workouts together. So it's been really nice. And like Molly said earlier today, it will be interesting to see after all this is over and we continue to, progress back to normalcy. I think some of these things will stick. So because I think they have been, there's been some great ideas and things that have come up throughout the district, and I think will only strengthen us in the future. So there's been some really great things happening. Next slide. So the next thing I wanted to just talk about is just about wellness classes in general. So our health education classes, physical education classes, and family and consumer science classes. I know across the district, every discipline has been doing amazing. I just wanted to highlight some of the things that my departments have been doing in particular. It's been very unique and very different. We have physical education at the high school where there's no sharing of equipment, there's no games at all, there's no competition. So kind of revamping our curriculum to make sure we're following guidelines has been a challenge, but also has been a good opportunity for us to try some new things. So we've been able to try we were able to purchase snowshoes at the high school this year, so the kids have been able to use those. We received a grant for Parker and McCarthy this year to receive snowshoes, and we're just waiting for those to be delivered. We've integrated some more pickleball into our high school curriculum, fitness, yoga, golf, so different activities that, some that we were doing and then maybe some that we weren't or have not done recently in the past and kind of brought back into our curriculum has been really great. And then just the elementary and middle school teachers being fully remote, they've really gotten creative with, they've done some escape rooms, some minute to win it challenges. What they have our students making at home for equipment is fun to watch. They've come up with some really creative ideas. So it's been really great. I do have a video on this. I don't know if it will work. It's a YouTube video. It's just it's a 2-minute video of just different things that I've talked about as far as physical education, health education classes. If it works, great. If it doesn't, no worry, Dr. Lang.
All right, thanks for putting me on the spot, Katie. Where would the video come to? Would I have to click one of these links?
Yeah, the first one where it says health and physical education classes during COVID.
All right, we'll give it a try.
Yep, thanks. Appreciate it. If it doesn't work, no worries.
Very, very flexible in presentation.
Yes.
By the end of the year, we're going to have this down pat.
No, we're not.
Yep.
Tough to be the guy in charge.
All right, we're going to try.
I got it.
Nope, your video is private. It's not available.
No worries.
All right, we're gonna have to skip that one, and we'll add it to the newsletter on Friday. It's gonna be quite the newsletter. We're gonna have a lot of videos. Sorry about that, Katie.
Perfect.
Go ahead.
No, it's not a problem at all. I was anticipating that anyways. And one last thing I wanted to highlight is just our early childhood classes at the high school. Mrs. Murphy has had to make a huge adjustment in her curriculum this year because she is used to having, number one, a preschool attached to her classroom, which is not open this year. And then she's also used to having her Exploring Early Childhood 3 students go out and be like a student teacher for the year in a classroom somewhere in the district, which also has not been able to happen this year. So we've worked a lot together and teamed up with community education and come up with some great opportunities for her students, for them to be able to work with kids remotely, because at this point we're not able to do it in person. So we did a CHS buddy program. So all the pre-K students in ComEd in the Lions Pride program were buddied up with one of Mrs. Murphy's Exploring Early Childhood 3 students this year. And they'll be their buddy for the entire school year. So they've been sending personal videos back and forth to each other. They did Valentine's Day cards in February back and forth to each other. Next month, later this month, they're going to do St. Patrick's Day cards. And then today was the first day they got to meet each other live. And I actually went into her classroom and got to see the kids. I don't know who was more excited, me, the high school students, the preschool students. I mean, everybody just had big smiles on their faces. And Mrs. Murphy's students, this is the first opportunity that they've had a live connection with younger students this year. So they came in the classroom with so much energy, so much excitement. It was really cute to see, and got to meet their buddy for the year. So that was a really exciting thing that happened today. And there was just a 20-second clip on the slides here of one of the Mrs. Murphy students. I think it was Madison Lane, and her meeting her buddy. So he was a little shy, but then Madison didn't skip a beat. She started talking to him right away and asking him questions, and she got him talking. And then the next minute, he was getting toys to show her and telling her about his house and his room and his family. So it was really a cute experience. So there's just been so many, I know, just across the district in all disciplines, but just for my departments in particular, it's been really nice to see some of the unique, fun activities that they've come up with, and just the collaboration has been amazing from kindergarten all the way up to grade 12. I say my teachers were pretty collaborative before, even more so now. I feel like they're just doing everything together and supporting each other, which is really nice to see. So you can go to the next slide, Dr. Lane. So one of the last things we wanted to share with you tonight, Mr. Romalo and I kind of worked on together and got it up and running. And we are excited to present this Family Fitness Challenge for the month of March that all 4 elementary schools are participating in. And it started yesterday. And we know March can be a long, challenging month sometimes, and it's been during this time maybe a little bit more challenging to get moving and get outside and get motivated. So we wanted to do something to promote family time, fitness, and just getting up and doing something. It doesn't need to be anything big. It could just be, helping your parents do chores. It could be going for a walk. It could be going for a bike ride. And we thought we would just make a little fun competition out of it. So at the end, we'll add up the minutes that families submit at the end of every week. And then at the end of the month, we will announce a school that moved the most minutes, just to kind of promote that family fun, moving fitness time. Mr. Ramallo, you had a lot to do with that, so if you want to add anything to the Family Fitness Challenge, go ahead.
No, I think you covered it, Mrs. Sims, except for the fact that South Row plans to take the victory. We're just really excited to get kids moving with families, and just this is a great time to get out there and just really value the importance of movement and healthy lifestyles, as Katie covered, just to really send home that message to students, just the importance of wellness, health, and just keeping them moving. And I know the students at South Row and staff have been very excited about engaging already, so we're looking forward to it.
We got some good competition. So at this time, that is the end of our presentation. Again, the three of us want to thank you for your time. And you are welcome to ask any questions, give us any feedback, comments, anything like that.
Anyone have any questions or comments? Donna?
Yes, thank you very much for that presentation. I had a chance to attend the South Row PTO meeting last night, which is one of my favorite meetings. What? Oh, I'm sorry. I had an opportunity to hear about the Family Fitness Challenge, and I offered to participate, at South Row, and Mr. Ramallo suggested that I send that challenge out to the other school committee members who are liaisons to these schools, to get you out and moving and contribute to, potentially beating South Row, which is a long shot, I know, but, in terms of the Family Fitness Challenge.
Okay.
All right, challenge accepted.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I love that challenge, Donna. Thank you.
I'm a free agent since I don't anyone liaison for any of these schools, so anyone who would like to get an elderly person on board, just let me know.
Right.
We are the smallest school in the district, Jeff, so we'll take any help we can get at South Row.
Right.
Small but mighty.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I'm in.
Just said it.
That was John.
All right, any other questions, comments? I just wanted to thank you for taking into consideration the social emotional health of the teachers. A lot of times that gets forgotten, and this is stressful for students, yes, but it is stressful for the teachers. I think the programming you have is great. I wish, the schools across the state would do that, because I know there's a lot of teachers having a tough time of it right now, so I do appreciate that, all that work you put into that.
Yeah, no, Molly and Jason and Katie, from my end too, thank you very much for the presentation. I know at recent meetings, we've talked a lot about, supporting kids and supporting adults through this whole pandemic, and I think your presentation really touched on a lot of the good work that you were doing over there. And it was nice to just kind of focus on that and highlight that so that the community can see what the schools are doing. South Row is obviously an excellent example of what's happening at the elementary level, and that's happening at very similar programming at our other elementary schools and middle school and high school. So it was just good to see. So I very much appreciate you taking the time tonight to share that with us.
All right, well, thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right,
Okay.
next up, the UMass T program.
Yep, I'm actually going to ask Assistant Superintendent Hirsch to just give the overview on that and to welcome our speakers this evening on that program.
Yeah, so this is actually, I was going back and forth with Dr. Bayronabon, but this is actually our 7th year of working closely with UMass Lowell for the Teaching Excellence and Achievement Program. It was actually originally brought into place with us with Dr. Angelo from UMass Lowell, who is an education professor, and he's able to work with the U.S. Department of Education in order to bring international teachers to the Merrimack Valley area. We're one of the districts that receive these international teachers. They're Fulbright scholars and fellows that come and work side by side with our teachers to learn different things that we're doing, but then also impart their knowledge with our students. Typically, we have many more T fellows that are with us this year, but obviously due to the pandemic, only so many were able to travel. They're actually physically here. They're just at the UMass Lowell campus, and they've been working virtually with Chelmsford Public Schools. And we've been fortunate enough, at least for this year, to have 2 T Fellows be with us, with Veronica Gabois, who was one of our French teachers at Chelmsford High School, and Michelle Kender, who was one of our science teachers at Chelmsford High School as well. Dr. Bayronovan has been working as our liaison with UMass Lowell to help work with these teachers, and also the university, to be able to put together this programming for this year. And I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Bayronovan, who can speak a little bit further about this and introduce our T Fellows that we have with us this evening.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Hirsch. Appreciate it. And you're right, this is, I believe, our 5th year in our relationship with UMass Lowell and this Fulbright T program. And each year it seems to getting better than the previous one. This particular year, I actually thought there wasn't going to be an opportunity to have the amazing T Fellows join us due to the COVID situation. But Professor Angulo worked very hard to be able to make it happen. And although we don't have the numbers that we've had in the past, there are still 14 of these fellows that are here, and 2 have been matched up with members of the Chelmsford Public Schools. And we have our 2 T Fellows here this evening that have been doing observations and working with Chelmsford teachers, as well as we also have one of our teacher liaisons, as you mentioned, Veronica Gadbois, here as well. And we're going to just take a few minutes to hear from the fellows to talk about their experience both within the program and their involvement within Chelmsford High School in particular, as both an observer and as a participant in the learning process. And so with us this evening, we have 2 of our T Fellows. The first is Abuidan from Nigeria. He is a chemistry and biology teacher. And we also have Aniston, who is from Cameroon, who is a English as a foreign language teacher. So I would like to welcome both of them to our meeting this evening, ask them to unmute their computers, and to take a few minutes and share a little bit about their experience this year, and in particular on their Mondays doing the observations at Chelmsford High School.
Oh, good evening, everyone. I'm so excited to be in your meet this evening, and I want to thank you for the privilege for having me in your school. My name is Abiodun Matthias Edo. I'm from Nigeria, Lagos State. Lagos State is a southern part of Nigeria, southern west part of Nigeria. I teach chemistry and biology, and I have students that are from grade 10 to grade 12. And their ages are from age 14 to 18. As a participant of a TA fellow program here in UMass Lowell, I've really learned a lot. And as a matter of fact, we have a couple of lessons as well as workshops, ranging from the field experience, going to some of the historic places at Boston, learning about the issue of Africans, Americans, know some of the sacrifice made by the people during the Civil War, the 54 Regiment and the rest of them. It was a really, really wonderful experience. Also coming back to some of the workshop here, we've been able to have a lot of workshop ranging from pedagogy as well as assessment, where we are able to learn the impact of gender in our school and how we can be able to make sure that we have a gender equity for all our students, and at the same time be able to make sure that every child is supported as a teacher, irrespective of their gender or background. We also learn a lot of things under the STEM. Myself being a science teacher, I was able to learn how to use videos as well as technology in order to be able to impart effectively during the classroom for my students. I was able to learn for the first time that there is something called a virtual laboratory, as well as the stimulation in sciences, and it was something that really, really, really awesome. Also, I was able to learn some of the warming up activities that is going to really be making my class to be interactive, and as well engage my students to make the learning and as well as teaching fun. I can still remember some of them has to do with some of the things that Dr. Matthew taught us that I really love to use during my classroom back home. It has to do with learning activities, which involve something like a game, expose them to game and make the class to be fun. And at the same time, to be able to make sure that, yes, every learner is, carried along when the teaching and learning is going on. We also talked about the leadership. We were taught as that our school is more or less should be a functioning school, not that the one that should just be like a normal conventional, but it should be a learning organization whereby every one of us have a role to play, even as a teacher, to be able to bring about a positive change and effect for the betterment of all our students. And also, we also learn about the gender. The gender workshop has also always been very exciting and impactful. We were able to learn for the fact that gender go beyond boys and girls. I'm coming across for the first time some of the terminologies in gender that we have a non-binary student among us, and we shouldn't just generalize that every student is either a boy or a girl. So it has always been impactful. And then also coming to Chelmsford High School, from the very first Monday that I started observing up till the last Monday, which is yesterday, it was very, very, very exciting. And one of the things I've been able to learn is the fact that my partner teacher, Michelle, was able to expose me to a lot of ways of making sciences to be more fun for the student. Most especially, I teach biology, but I'm learning it in another way. That yes, biology is something that yes, is part of interactive, engaging the students, make them to be able to do things on their own and as well as be able to learn more. So I really, really learned a lot. And at the same time, I was able to observe that the school system here in the US is a bit different from ours. The classroom control here is excellent. During the class, the entire class is ready to be focused, and at the same time, they were really, interested in what the teacher is teaching them, just simply because they were adequately engaged. Meanwhile, back home there in Nigeria, we have a large number of students in the classroom, but at the same time, for us to be able to get that 100% attention was a big challenge. And one of the things I've been able to learn during my observation here is that, of course, it is possible for me to even engage them to have that 100% attention during the teaching and learning process. And at the same time, I saw some of the models and some of the ways she was able to bring some functional games into the whole of the things. Like yesterday, we did something like that to do with Mad Moment Madness, and it was really, really engaging and fun. So we apply all those things by the grace of God when I get back to my student back home in Nigeria. Thank you very much. And
excellent. Thank you so much, Abuidan. Yes, you were paired with Mrs. Kender at Chelmsford High School, and I'm so glad it was a positive experience. And one of the things that you mentioned about is the idea of gender, and that is kind of the theme for the UMass Lowell Fulbright program, is the idea of gender. And we were lucky enough to have Chelmsford Public Schools Fine Arts Department Coordinator, Dr. Whittlesley, come in to speak to all the T Fellows about the ideas of gender, and not just male and female, but looking at the transgender, etc. Let me take a moment now to introduce Ernestine from Cameroon to share a little bit about her experience in the program, and also working with Madame Gadbois in the French department.
Good evening, everyone. It's a real privilege to be here, and I'm happy. And I'm Nestine Lumchi from Cameroon. Cameroon is situated central west of Africa, a very close neighbor to Nigeria. And so I have a common language I speak with Abiodun, and we happen to be in Chelmsford together. It's been an enriching experience from the seminars and workshops we've had here. I've been enjoying every bit of it. The leadership course at the beginning, I was wondering, what is Professor James Nerin talking about? But after 2 weeks, I said, this is serious. And presently, he has left me with one thing. I think that's a consultancy protocol that has expanded my perspective, and I think I'll go back and beyond teaching. I do teacher training with the British Council. I'm a teacher trainer for the British Council. I should take some of these things to my teacher training and help them to discover and solve their own problems within themselves. The gender has been wonderful. Pizza Mai, I would say in one word, she's phenomenal. I can't find a better way to describe her. She's just mind blowing. And so that course it has kept me thinking. She's brought activities that have revamped my thinking and my teaching, and sent me back to question myself, such as the front line or the privilege line activity, the center periphery activities that have helped me see beyond the usual, because oftentimes we do assume that students go home on a full belly, they should be able to buy textbooks, they have nothing to worry about, but that's not always the reality. There are a lot of factors that draw them back. The pedagogy and assessment, Matthew has just been the right person, full of energy. And from time to time, I ask myself, how long has Matthew been teaching with this kind of energy? And I wonder how long he can stand with this kind of energy. And so each time I said, no, this guy is going to get tired today. He's not going to be full of energy. And he comes with a bag of energy. And even by the time he's going, you think he'll be weary. He still has some energy to give us before he leaves. So always full of energy. And I'm looking out to tap the secret of that energy is bringing me Dr. Bobek. They've been very wonderful, helping us to look at the learner's mindset and teach with the perspective of a growing mindset rather than a fixed mindset for both ourselves as teachers and for the learners we are teaching. It's really been wonderful sessions. The effort strategies have been great, and my observation as co-teacher, because I've not just been doing observation at Chelmsford, that's what I must say. I've been co-teaching. I've had that rare privilege to co-teach and observe many classes with my partner teacher, Veronica. I have had the privilege to go to a French class and co-teach. I was there with another Matthew yesterday in his French class. I've had the opportunity to visit Colleen in her ESL class, and in the French class. It's been a wonderful experience because I felt very welcome from the first day. I say so because the day I was coming into that class, I don't know whether it was by coincidence or it was by making that they were actually exploring French-speaking African countries. And I come from a bilingual country that is majority French-speaking. And so Cameroon was one of the countries on the list. And you imagine walking into a class and they're talking about you, and you begin to feel so proud and so confident, and you feel welcome. That is the feeling I got when I entered the class. And some of those learners have been just so helpful. I have the impression that even though I'm distant from these learners, they get to see me on the screen. Some of them can actually relate with me because when a learner will ask me, Madam, are you fine today? And truly, I wasn't very fine yesterday. And she said, are you fine today? And I was like, yeah, I'm a little bit tired. Then I see that there is a connection, there is a bond. And I'm just so sad that if not for this Zoom, maybe I would have had so much, if not for COVID that has compelled us to use Zoom, maybe I would have had so much more interaction. But I feel that bond. I feel that the learners are following and that they can feel me without seeing me. And that is the feeling I'm going with from Chelmsford. It's been a wonderful experience. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that. And let's turn to your partner teacher, Madame Gadbois, who's been a veteran in this program for a few years now. Can you share a little bit about your experience being involved, and also how we've been making the modifications based on the difficult times that we're in with COVID-19?
Thank you. Yes, it's been really a wonderful experience. This is my third year having a partner teacher, and Ernestine is a blessing. She's come to our class and taken just right to it and helping out. We've been co-planning our lessons, and as she said, I want to give her as much opportunity to interact with the students, and that has been really wonderful. I know they really appreciate her being there. As a matter of fact, they were asking me some questions today. They may have been a little bit shy to ask her questions yesterday, but they were asking me some questions today. And it's just been a wonderful experience. The COVID situation hasn't been great. Obviously, it's not ideal to not have her physically in our classroom, but I do feel like the connections are being made, and they will have opportunities to meet up with her. Little does she know, she's going to be put in a breakout room with some of them next week, so she'll be able to interact with smaller groups of the students. So it's been a wonderful experience.
Excellent. Thank you so much for Madame Gadbois. I would say that this experience of this Fulbright program is one of the best relationships that we have with UMass Lowell. And it's something that not only do the educators who come to this country learn about our system, we get the opportunity to learn from them, because these are some of the best teachers around the world from their country selected. So it's really a mutual relationship where we are able to learn from them as they are also learn with us. And we are hoping to be able to continue our role and even grow it further in the years to come. So with that, I thank you for being in this school committee meeting, Ernestine and Abudan. And thank you, Madame Gadbois, as well. And we'll turn it back over to Dr. Lang. If there are any questions from the school committee, we would be happy to answer them.
Anyone have questions, comments?
I agree with the energy comment. That's all I got. No, that was great. That was I really appreciate everybody coming on. It's really great. Every year we see this program, just the amount of stories and interest and just the exchange of ideas. The whole program is positive. So thank you for coming on, and I appreciate sharing your stories.
Yeah.
Thank you.
For me personally, I always love to see the international impact here right in Chelmsford. Thank you for bringing yourselves to the table and for sharing how you teach and being willing to learn from us, and at the same time allowing us to learn from you. And I'm just going to say bonsoir. I hope that you have a good night, and thank you so much for everything.
Right. Well, thank you very much.
Bonsoir, merci.
Donna, you have
Au
something?
revoir.
No, I was just going to say that it's always wonderful to have them here, and I have the opportunity to see them from the school committee perspective here and as a teacher at Lowell High School. And I find it a very enriching experience, both for myself and for my students, to have the Fulbright Scholars in my classroom observing and having the opportunity to be able to talk to them about the experiences in their country and how they see things working in our country, and to be able to share ideas and experiences. And at the end of it all, I can honestly say that what comes through, I think, from everyone is a student-centered approach and a genuine desire to want kids to be successful in school.
Great.
Right.
Well, Matthew and Veronica and our fellows, thank you very much for joining us tonight and talking a little bit about your experience. We hope everyone has safe trips home, and very much just appreciate you being here this evening and the work that you did in Chelmsford while you were with us. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Have a good night.
Thank you for sharing.
Thank you, Matthew.
Good night.
Good night.
Right. Log off of.
Kinda log
Go to meeting is
Yeah,
done.
something must be happening with,
Yeah, must have been the program. I mean,
well, I'm not sure if it was the program. It was indicating I was having slow internet connection. So I don't know if there's something happening outside either. The wind has been kind of howling all day.
What's up today?
So it could be that as well. Okay.
All right, so we're moving on to our next item is a review of school committee goals, mid-year review. So back in October, we decided that this year we'd concentrate our goals on areas to help us get through this unusual year. So some of those goals were aimed at supporting students and staff in the different learning models, monitoring and improving programming for both social and emotional well-being, and encouraging an inclusive environment, and maintaining and aligning our financial resource to effectively get through this year and plan for the upcoming year. So what I did is I just went through the agendas since that time to see the different places where we're addressing some of those issues. Obviously, we still have 4 months left, so we still have a lot of work to do. But I think, overall, we've done a pretty good job, at kind of focusing in on those areas that we wanted to focus in on, and hopefully we can continue to make the year run as effectively as it's been running so far. So I don't know if anybody has anything they want to add to these, or comments, or suggestions going forward. Donna?
So on our communication strategy, I think the one thing that I'd really like to take a look at sooner than later is, a lot of times we get emails addressed to all of us, and I'm never really sure who's going to respond. So I respond to some, and I know other people respond to some, but there doesn't seem to be a system. And it troubles me that people maybe feel that their emails are going unanswered in some way. So I'm not sure what the answer is to that. One thing I thought of, but they don't necessarily indicate it, was based on our liaison responsibilities. But as I said, sometimes parents don't, or people don't necessarily indicate what school they're from. But I was just trying to think of some ways.
I agree, and sometimes it's hard because sometimes they're addressed to us and the superintendent.
Right.
So, sometimes, if it's just addressed to me, I know I respond back. If it's addressed to the committee, I'll often respond back. But if it's addressed to superintendent, I normally won't.
Yeah, even from my perspective, it is confusing because sometimes I'm just included in the email, or I'm copied. There are emails that get personal too with student information. So sometimes if that's the case, I don't include you in my response, but I respond to the parent because I really can't get into the student-related stuff with the school committee. So I agree wholeheartedly. Maybe we could just kind of talk about some system to make sure everyone feels like they're getting heard and they're getting a response, but that it's a coordinated effort so that we know the loop's been closed. But, the right person's kind of replying.
I guess, because I'm new at this, if I have one directly sent to me, I'll respond and I'll ask if I can share it with the other members of the committee. But maybe I misunderstood, but I thought communications on issues like that was supposed to come from the chairperson.
Again, and so I will typically, if it's just to the school committee, I will respond back. And sometimes I do reply, sometimes I don't. But if it has other people on it, that a lot of times will be addressed to somebody else, and I don't want to step on anyone else's toes, so I don't normally respond to those.
Not to give you more to do.
No. I agree. I try to get back to the ones that are just to us, and obviously the ones that us individually we all respond to. But yeah, no, we could definitely do a better job. Yep.
Agreed.
I tried to respond in some way, always to acknowledge that I did receive the email, because even if I just read it, I think that the person took time to do it and to provide the input. And I also want to, personally, I think it's very important to cultivate input and a culture of inclusion from anyone in our community who is interested in providing their input. So I feel it's important to respond. I agree. I think everybody should be responded to, and we should figure that out. But also in the communication, my other thing is that I find it difficult sometimes on follow-up with communication. So if we then deal with an issue here at the school committee level, and then it's up to administration to then implement whatever the decision was that was reached. Sometimes we're copied, and Dr. Lang says that he's going to be sending us a copy of whatever the communication is that's going to go out. But then from the school level, at the school level, we don't know what happened there. And it makes it very difficult to then respond and communicate. And we have an excellent example of that coming up tonight, and I'll point that out when we get to it. But I think that needs to be worked on. in terms of how we follow up on the things that we do talk about, and continue to have the communication with the community that we're serving here. So just my input there.
Right, other things?
I'd just like to work on that sooner than later. Like I said, I don't have an answer, but
I think especially now.
I
for the
just
next
think,
few
I think
months
we,
of
yeah, yes. So, I don't know, just, maybe if we could put on the next agenda, maybe come with some ideas,
Sure, yeah.
see if we can figure something out.
Yeah, send me some ideas and they can throw them down, yeah, absolutely. All right, anything else in our goals? Okay, I think superintendent did a similar.
Yeah, when Dennis had mentioned he was gonna do a little mid-year update, I did the same with Linda for some of the action items we had. They're very similar to yours because our goals are meshed. But our, first goal kind of worked on student academic achievement, and we just highlighted some of the different report outs and some of the progress we've made this year on that particular goal. Second one was really related to the support of pro-social learning environment, a lot of the SEL work that's been ongoing in the schools. So some updates for you on that. The third goal was around aligning the financial resources, very similar to yours with budget and things along those lines. There is some work in here also on like that HVAC work that we've done over the course of the year. So there is some kind of facility overlay on that particular issue. One goal that we didn't, or one kind of bullet that we didn't really get to, that I think is probably going to have to be refined a little bit is over the course of the summer and even the fall, like our 10-year capital plan. We've obviously had a capital plan each year. We go forward to town, the capital committee for funding for various projects. But once we are kind of out of the school year and can kind of look ahead a little bit, I do think we need to go back and revisit our larger school building project. I mentioned to Dennis too, like our application with the MSBA for a new project. We've put in a few times. It hasn't been funded. We need to kind of re-strategize on that. Again, it's no one's fault. It's just they actually hadn't even acted upon last year's grants yet. But just so that we can kind of bring that to the forefront again. Talked a little bit about, our current facility needs, taking a look at our enrollments and what's going to be happening over the next number of years. So I think that's something we really haven't focused on this particular year, but when we get into the summer and even the fall, I think we need to go back and look a little bit at that. So again, these are just some kind of, obviously still much more work to be done for the second half of the year, but just some bullets of little project updates for you, just to let you know, kind of how we're doing.
Yeah. And in a similar vein to the capital plan, we're going to get back to the strategic plan at some point that we
Yes.
started and then was abruptly halted, so that's something we'll come up with
Right.
some thoughts on in the next couple of meetings about where do we go from here as far as coming up with a strategic plan, and I'm sure it's going to have changed from what it was, a year ago, so.
Yeah, I think Molly even mentioned in her presentation, I mean, there are some things that have worked really well over the course of this year that we probably never would have had to explore if we didn't find ourselves in this predicament. So I do think once everything is kind of said and done, we can step back and say, what really worked well, what would we have done differently? Because there are some elements, I think, that we're going to want to put in our new plan. And not that it's good that we didn't have a plan, but everything was kind of coming together when, it was March 13th. We're almost coming up on a year, kind of hit last year. So I think we can this summer and fall refocus and figure out how we want to go about putting that back into effect. So that would be a good, kind of second big project for next year.
And I think along the line of our capital plan is just to take a look at, I know it's tied to our maintenance plan, just to make sure, so our maintenance has almost been an overdrive, I think,
You
for
mean
the
like the
last year and a
preventative
half.
maintenance or the cleaning?
So just in general maintenance, not necessarily related to COVID, but,
Right.
as I said, I think we've been doing a lot, but, to just make sure that we're on track for what it is that we need to be doing.
Sure.
On the every student achieving academically, I think we've had some, reports on where we are at with students in terms of this year. I think we need to continue to update that reporting, but at the same time, present some strategies that we are using in order to take some corrective action and to help these students achieve, not just in returning them in person to learning, but what can we do even with the full remote students to help them academically this year. And then my other comment is on supporting a positive pro-social learning environment. I think right now we're in the middle of seeing some tough things happening to students, where some of our counselors are having to refer students for services and so on, because there are definitely emotional impacts going on here. And I haven't seen what, district-wide, what's happening with that. We haven't really had a session on that, and I think that that would be important to see. It was good to see from the grammar school level, from the elementary school level, what this team at South Row did in order to try to be the leaders in the school and to
Right.
deal administratively in the school. I don't know if that's what's happening at every other elementary. I would think that that's probably what they're trying to do as well. But I think as a district, we're at different levels here. What's happening in that aspect of things, in the social emotional learning component of things, would be very important for us to have that report.
All right, any other thoughts? All right, so we're halfway home, a lot of work to do, but I think we're on track, which is good.
Great.
All right, next item. COVID
Yes,
update.
so what I tried to do for you in this next one, and this will kind of take a little bit, but we've been talking about various elements of, COVID and our school programming and whatnot. And I tried to kind of put it into one presentation for you, just so that we could walk through it and kind of cover most of these spots. I do know, again, we'd mentioned earlier, like people had emailed in different questions, so if we get to a particular point in the presentation and I don't say something, please just kind of prompt me or ask a question so that we can try to answer some of the questions. But overall, the first thing I wanted to just take a look at, because we have talked about this a little bit, I think as a district, we've done a very good job of managing, the COVID, not having there be COVID spread within our schools. And I think one of the callers mentioned earlier, that really is a credit from, bottom to top through this district. Our staff have done a nice job of, the hand hygiene, the wearing of the masks, the social distancing within classrooms, and that really has helped us keep our COVID counts low within Chelmsford, but specifically within the school system. I just pulled the data for Chelmsford for the last number of weeks. Again, this is something that gets reported on a weekly basis on Thursdays. The state puts out the different COVID numbers. So the newest week is actually at the top, and then it goes back to the end of January. But you can see in the town of Chelmsford, the rates have actually decreased from 6.4% positivity down to 3.32 just this past week. So it's showing a nice trend. What I've been trying to continue to message in the weekly announcements and things like that is, while we're certainly moving in the right direction, we don't want to let our guard up. We don't want to stop doing what we know has been working. And, we don't want to switch to, not wearing masks and not distancing and whatnot. We need to really maintain that through the springtime. But we've seen, within the town of Chelmsford, that number is continuing to decline, which I think is really positive. Throughout the course of this school year, this past fall, one of the things that we instituted was a weekly COVID dashboard to just actually talk about the data within the Chelmsford Public Schools. Because the townwide data is certainly everyone in the town of Chelmsford, but that is not restrictive to just students in the Chelmsford Public Schools. That would be students that go to any private school, parochial school. You just happen to reside within Chelmsford, and you're in that larger group. The Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, they produce a weekly number of all just Chelmsford Public School cases, but they don't break it down by school. So they just might say there's 3 or 4 student cases or, 1 or 2 adult cases within the community. And everyone's kind of curious, is it happening in my school or not or whatnot? So this fall, we decided to actually come up with a weekly dashboard that the total numbers mirror and match the state, but we actually break it down by school. So what we've seen actually over the last 5 weeks, or it's technically 6 weeks because we had the 2-week vacation period, we, coming back from vacation last week for the reporting period, actually didn't have any staff or student cases in the district that affected in-person learning, which I think was great. Even if you look back into the middle of January, we had, 7 cases 1 week overall district-wide, and that's of about a little over 3,000 students in person. So, that's a really low number, 4, 7, 4. So we've really been managing the overall cases very well, I think. And again, the numbers aren't going down drastically for the schools, with the exception of last week where we had no cases. We basically stayed in that handful of student and staff cases over the course of the year. But again, I think I'm just happy with the way the data is continuing to trend, but we don't want to let up our guard. We don't want to do things significantly different that are going to alter our numbers in any way. One of the issues that, switching to vaccine, that we've heard, quite a bit about, and even one of our callers this evening talked about, I want, and I think everyone wants on the committee and in the town, our educators who really are frontline responders in this crisis, to receive the vaccine so that they feel a little bit more comfortable, in classrooms. If we're going to talk about returning more kids to in-person learning, I think that is a necessary step. It's one of several layers of mitigation that we're looking at. A vaccine is certainly going to help. Pool testing, which we'll talk a little bit, is another layer. The HVAC improvements we've done within the buildings is another layer. Social distancing, the masks, the hand washing is a fourth layer. So I think by all of these 4 measures, again, we need to keep them up. And then a few weeks later, the 65 and olders with the 2 comorbidities went. So teachers and K-12 individuals are in that next group to go for a vaccine or to be eligible. We're on the hold. We're kind of waiting for that. I'll tell you, this afternoon, I happened to be watching the news as I was doing some work, and the president was on, kind of imploring states to rethink about classifying teachers as first responders, and as early as next week, actually be able to have them be identified as eligible to receive the vaccine. So that was great news. I'm hoping that happens and that channels down to the state level. We're certainly going to keep up our communication on that front. What we had worked on before we know that this was all happening is the Chelmsford Board of Health, and again, Sue Rose has been here for a couple of meetings. They've been excellent to work with this whole time, whether it's been contact tracing or just providing some medical help and guidance to us. They did a wonderful job with the first responder vaccination. It was a regional effort for police and fire and whatnot back in January. And we had collected all of the different names of staff that were interested in receiving the vaccine. I'd sent an email out, and really within a matter of hours and a couple days, we had over 700 staff in the district sign on to be able to receive the vaccine when it came in. And our hope was that once teachers were eligible, the Board of Health would be able to receive the vaccine, and we could set up a clinic on an afternoon or 2 afternoons and basically get through all of our staff and have them very quickly and efficiently and effectively vaccinated. Unfortunately, about a week and a half ago, the governor's office indicated that they wanted to not send, or they were not going to send, first doses of vaccine for new eligible individuals to the local boards of health. They were really going to be pushing the new vaccine shipments to more regional, kind of super vaccine sites. So that's obviously disappointing to me personally, but I know to our teachers and our staff in the district, because when you have a plan to do something and you've put a lot of time and effort into it, it would be very easy for our Board of Health and our own nurses who work for us to help administer the vaccine, to get our staff vaccinated, and really just having that extra layer of protection, which I think is going to go a long way to making people feel more reassured as we come into schools. I obviously can't change what the governor's going to do or what the governor's going to recommend vaccine-wise. But when it looked like that was not going to be an option for us, I did reach out to Lowell General, because they are a regional site and they're probably our closest site. They opened up the old Macon building on Pawtucket Boulevard. I forget exactly the name of it, but Cross River Center is in my PowerPoint. They opened up a center to be able to do like mass vaccinations over there. So I reached out to them. They're certainly willing to vaccinate our staff once they hit the eligibility tier. When I talked to them last week, they said, if you do have any staff that are over 65 or have the 2 comorbidities, they can sign on right now. They clarified for me, because some of our staff do live in New Hampshire, where we're so close to the border. The Mass sites are really supposed to be for Massachusetts residents. However, if our staff work in Mass, they work in our school system, but happen to live in New Hampshire, that's fine. They're still going to vaccinate our staff for us. So that's good news for the staff. They're not going to have to be wondering. But, the one issue I see logistically, it would have been much easier to just go through the Board of Health, because we could have scheduled the times. What I don't want to see happen, and what I'm trying to work with Lowell General to do, is there's almost like a frenzy whenever shots open up. And I don't want staff, I understand they want the vaccine, but it's going to be very difficult operationally if they're all independently jumping on, trying to schedule appointments, and then they're having to take time out of school to go get a shot or whatnot. So I'm trying to work with Lowell General to, once we get eligibility, to set up blocks of time where we might be able to just schedule our staff to go, so that it's going to be less disruptive to the school day. We are working on that. What we did find out yesterday as well is previously under phase 1, all of our OTs, PTs, speech therapists did qualify for the vaccine, and we were able to get them vaccinated through the Board of Health. So that was wonderful. We heard yesterday, I believe it was, that our behavioral health staff, so this would be say our any of our staff in substantially separate programs. So if it's a life skills program, if it's an ABA program, I'm thinking along the lines like a BIAM autism program, which would feed up to Parker and the high schools next, would now qualify. So that would be teachers and paras. Our life skills program, our functional academic program, say at Center, and that feeds up to McCarthy, and then the high school's PAVE program, those staff would qualify. So I know the union has noticed those individuals. We're doing the same. I reached out to Lowell General to try to see if we can get a block of spots to be able to get those staff vaccinated. So it is going to start to happen. I think it's just a little frustrating that it couldn't have happened under more our terms with the Board of Health, because we're really prepared for that. But we're going to make the very best of it. And Lowell General is a great partner. Absolutely no knock on them. It just would have been a little bit easier to do it on site here for our staff. So I am hopeful. We're going to still have to see what actually comes of, the president's kind of pushing today at the state level. I do know a lot of pressure has been put on, the governor's office to kind of reconsider their strategy, particularly with the J&J vaccine, which is a 1-dose vaccine, as opposed to the Pfizer and the Moderna, which are 2. I mean, that would be a great tool to be able to help quickly vaccinate our staff and not have to worry about that second dose either in scheduling. So more to come on that front. We're spending hours each day, whether it's on vaccination or the pool testing we're going to get into a little bit. I mean, this has become our full-time jobs, trying to really kind of manage this piece of the pandemic work. But that's a little bit I have for you on vaccination at this point. And obviously, as we get information, we're sharing it with staff so that we can get them signed up and get the vaccine. And again, to just kind of build that comfort level.
Any questions on?
Anything on vaccine?
Any indication from Lowell General when it is they may be able to offer a block? Are you just waiting for more vaccines? Or?
Yeah, I think when I talked to them the other day, I want to say off the top of my head, they had indicated at that time they were set up for about 1,000 doses a day, in that they had capacity, if they had vaccine, to quickly ramp up to 2,000. I think the individual I was speaking with said, potentially they could be like a 5,000 dose per day site. So the capacity is certainly there. I think it's the access to the vaccine that's the issue. And it just gets more complicated when it's the two-dose vaccine, because you're really tying up 2 slots. If it's the Moderna one, you're taking a shot day 1, and then they have to schedule the follow-up appointment day 28. So, you're basically tying up a calendar. So when you get to day 28, those shots are already kind of filled for the day. You've got to hope for new vaccine to be able to open up more spots. So I do know that they're working very hard. I think they are hoping that the Johnson vaccine is really going to be earmarked towards teachers in particular. And again, I was just listening to that this afternoon. So as soon as we know more, we'll get it out there. I don't think their capacity is going to be the issue. I really think it's just access to the vaccine.
And do we have a strategy for getting that information out to staff? Will it be through the union, through you?
Yeah, well, what I've been doing myself is just an all-staff broadcast.
Okay.
So when we found out, I think it was yesterday, that they were actually opening up a block of spots, we kind of got the heads up that was happening. So I was able to email the staff with a link to sign up. You had to meet one of the eligibility criteria, though, and they were able to do that. So, no, they've been very good about kind of, forecasting for me when they may make some changes. Which is, again, wonderful. So we're going to keep that going. But I immediately email staff directly, just an all-staff broadcast. And then I know the union is pushing information out also. I know they're very on to the, the addition of, say, the ABA, the behavioral health staff, as well as now, if this change comes out at the state level, where we can vaccinate the educators. We're going to be right on top of that.
Thank you.
Anything else?
This doesn't address vaccination of students, it's staff right here.
Staff.
Now, for students, when it gets to there, as far as we know right now, there's only one vaccine out there that is for 16 and above.
That's my understanding.
I believe so, right now.
Yes.
And so this is something we're gonna have to add into our plan going forward in terms of, I don't know when it's gonna get there.
Right.
But if it gets there before the end of this year, it would absolutely be wonderful to be able to bring 16 and above back. And I don't know what we can require of students in terms of vaccination. The same thing that, you know, staff may refuse to take, but I don't know what the requirements are, and what we can impose as requirements in terms of vaccination.
Yeah, on the staff level, we can't impose it. We can't mandate that staff receive vaccination. I think we're gonna get to the point where once vaccination is widely available and staff have access to the vaccination, it's gonna be kind of on them to accept the vaccination, or we need to start coming back to work, you know, with or without the vaccination. So just not, you're not gonna be able to stay out of work indefinitely if you just refuse to get the vaccine. Once we're able to get the vaccine, it's widely available and we can use it. It's gotta be part of our strategy for reopening schools and getting schools back more full-time.
Okay, so this is part of our strategy, and we're making it known.
Right.
That it is. The other thing is, there are side effects to some people when they take this vaccine. So if you've got 500 staff members taking the vaccine in one shot, in one time, and quite a few sick, which I hope not.
Right.
And, you know, I've only had one family member vaccinated, my mother, and she had no side effects so far for both, so I don't know. But, you know, I'm just thinking in terms of, as a policy for the district,
Right.
in terms of who gets vaccinated, and I can't wait for the ability for people to do exactly this, so nothing negative in terms of my comments on there. I really think vaccination is very important.
Right.
As part of the strategy. But I think we need to keep in mind that in terms of students, it's only 16 and above that will be able to have access to it. And so we cannot let go of all of the other safety precautions, even when we have people who have been vaccinated.
Yeah, no, we're gonna have to, I mean, for the foreseeable future, maintain the the mask wearing and the hand washing and whatnot. That's gonna have to just kind of become part of our routine for the foreseeable future. I don't even know, and again, I'm not the expert in this, but I would say that there's a very good chance, even going back to school in the fall, that, you know, even if some of our older students, you know, are 16 and ups, or I'm not sure, I think the trial is now on 12-year-olds and ups, you know, there's a chance that some of those students will be vaccinated before the fall. There's a very good chance that a majority of students won't. So that's why, again, the masks are going to be important, and hand washing and things like that. Again, I'm not the expert. I'm just looking at the trajectory of how this is all working. I think, you know, we're going to have to plan, obviously, multiple pathways. But I don't think it's a given that students will be vaccinated by the fall, by the time we come back to school. I don't think we can just plan for that.
But I think by the fall, we're gonna be critical mass with vaccinations. They just announced we're gonna have enough doses by, I think, May.
Yeah, they said
even though they
the
won't be
end-
distributed.
Yeah, the end of May.
End of May. So, you
But I
know,
don't
the
know
critical mass is what's important, I think.
No, I agree with you on that. I'm just saying, like, I don't know necessarily, like, our elementary school kids would be vaccinated by that point. But, yeah, that herd immunity that they're talking about trying to get to,
Well,
you know, hopefully will be on the way.
Kids are well versed in wearing masks, so if we don't have all the kids, you
Yeah.
know, they can wear masks.
That's true.
All right, anything else on vaccinations? Okay. Pool testing.
Pool testing, 6 hours of my day, working on pool tests. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of an update on kind of the pool testing program and where we're at, how I see this rolling out, and a little bit of timeline for you. So this is a multi-stepped process, a lot more labor intensive than I thought it was going to be, even just from a paperwork standpoint. So we originally had to apply to the Mass Executive Office of Health and Human Safety, as well as DESE, for approval to even conduct pool testing or be a pool testing site. So we got all that paperwork together, we got it all signed off on, we got it all submitted, and we were approved, which is good. So we originally submitted for 8 sites. So we submitted for all of our high school, Parker McCarthy, our 4 elementary, as well as the Westland School. So all 8 sites in Chelmsford where we have students attending school are eligible to conduct pool testing. The one caveat is we're looking through this different programming. When it comes to the Westlands School, our youngest population, I absolutely want to allow staff to voluntarily participate in the program. It's 100% voluntary participation. But I'm not going to recommend or really even promote that the students, the preschool students, participate in the program. A lot of them, obviously, it's our special needs integrated preschool program. A lot have sensory issues and whatnot, and I think exposing them in the school setting to that just is not in our best interest. I think if the staff are receiving the testing if they want to, I think that's totally fine. But I'm not going to really be pushing and promoting for our preschool population. And if you think about the Westlands, it's not only CHIPS, but we have Community Ed over there. And I believe they have students as young as 18 months or, you know, which really are kind of babies that I don't think we need to be pool testing. So I just wanted to throw that out because we have gotten different concerns. What I see this being open to is all of our elementary, middle, high school, and Westlands for staff, but really not pushing the students in the Westlands building. So we got our approval from DESE. We're approved for those 8 different sites. And then we had to wait to be paired with our testing provider. So we were paired with a provider called CIC. So that's like a regional provider who's going to be working with us to do all of the test processing and administration and whatnot. So we've had a couple of different calls with them. And on the next note, CIC also then kind of subcontracts and pairs with a group that will be able to come out in the field and actually help us with the administration of this program because it's very labor intensive. So we've been paired with CIC as the overarching provider, and then a group called Meet Caregivers, who's another medical group who would provide us with, you know, people to collect the specimens in the field, observers, and we're going to talk about that in a second as far as, you know, age of kids involved and whatnot. Someone to site coordinate for us, to label all the different samples, and then to courier the samples to Cambridge, where the CIC lab is, where they're going to be analyzed on a daily basis. So that has all happened. I think the little bit of a bottleneck that we're in right now is that obviously most school districts in the state are entertaining and trying to get this program off the ground at the exact same time. So CIC and even this Meet Caregivers group is having to expand, you know, in profound numbers of staff in our areas in the middle of a pandemic as every district is trying to roll out this program at the same time. So there's been a little bottlenecking as far as getting our program coordinated, trying to get them to be able to identify and provide staff to us to get the program off the ground. Other districts, I've talked to other local superintendents who are in a similar situation, and we're all in the same boat. It's not that, you know, districts are way ahead of us. We're all kind of, most have been paired with CIC, and they're now waiting to get some staff in the district. Where we hit kind of not a further bottleneck, but one other issue is that next bullet is once you do, and we'll go back in a second and talk about pool testing and how that'll work. But once you actually do your pool test and the specimen is sent to the lab, if you end up with a positive pool, and let's say there were 8 people in the pool, we get notified immediately on the computer that you had a pool that was positive, and you need to administer a follow-up PCR test. So that's something that our school nurses will provide. And what I see happening is, let's say it was a Monday that we happen to do the pool test at a particular school. The samples go into the lab. Within 24 hours, we should receive the result. So Tuesday, if we ever had a positive pool, I'm hoping that the students are in the school that day that were in the pool, and we would get flagged that we had a positive pool. We know the 8 people to go immediately pull and administer the Binex test with. To be able to administer the Binex follow-up test was a separate set of, we had to receive medical documentation, medical sign-offs for that, clearance to be able to run the tests, to provide the data to the state, to do the information sharing over the computer and whatnot. So that was a whole process unto itself. Some districts in the state, and these are the districts that you're hearing about who have already kind of got pool testing going, some districts had already been approved for for the BINEX test last fall. There were a number of districts that even without pool testing in place, they signed on to be a BINEX district, and they would have test kits available, say in the nurse's office, in the event that they ever had a suspected case, they would administer the BINEX test. We, and like Borica and Tewksbury I was talking to the other day, we never signed up for that because it was really only a test if you knew someone was symptomatic. It wasn't a like a broad test you would just administer to anyone. So we had to first get approval to do the BINEX test to be able to administer it, to have them on site. So we actually have them on site now. Again, our nurses are training with Peggy Gump, our school nurse coordinator, to be able to administer that. But that was a whole separate approval process we had to go through. That all had to be approved before we could move forward and even receive the test kits on the first front. So at this point in time, we have the BINEX approval. Everything is signed off on. We have the pool testing approval. We have the pairing of CIC, who's our provider, and we have the Meet Caregivers group, who's going to be providing us staff. And we're meeting and talking regularly about coordinating this whole effort to get it off the ground. We've received BINEX test kits, so we actually have those as follow-ups. We've received sample, the pool test kits, so that my goal is next week to actually do some samples, just some small samples, and be able to kind of go through the process and see how it goes. And then the last thing we're waiting for, which I hope to receive tomorrow, is a comprehensive consent form that we need to have staff and students sign off on. It's a completely voluntary program. But instead of sending out 3 different consents, because you've got a consent for pool testing, you've got a consent for BINEX in the event your pool is positive, and you've got a consent for like electronic information sharing with the state portal, the group we're working with is trying to put it all together into one consolidated consent, which will then I'll be able to email out to families and staff to be able to get them signed on. So people, I have to say, really, our parents and our staff have been wonderful. If I send a communication with something like this, they've been jumping on it right away. So if we're able to get a good number of students at each of our, say, 8 schools, students and staff who want to volunteer, we can seek them out next week and just run a couple of small samples and just kind of work through the kinks and see what it will be like. And then I see over the course of, next week as more people sign on, probably that week of the 15th would be when we kind of launch our first tests. Again, we've got to work through the different scheduling components because we've got a large number of people who are potentially going to test. We've got 2 different cohorts of students, so we're likely going to have some COVID testing on Mondays and some COVID testings on Thursdays to be able to capture students who might just be in one of the 2 cohorts. So I just want you to know there's a lot going on behind the scenes, but there's a lot to this, and we really want to get it right. But I see us being able to, on the week of the 15th, test anyone who's given consent. And then as it goes on, every given week, say if it happens to be the week for cohort A that we're at South Row, and, we started out with 60, but now it's up to 90, we'll be able to test 90. And we'll just continue to kind of grow the program based on the active consents we have at that time. So that's kind of in a nutshell the overarching program. How I see the program, if we want to switch to in practice, how this will work. So the Meet Caregivers group will give us some staff. So they'll give us a site coordinator. Let's just pick on South Row because they were on the thing today. So we'll have a site coordinator for South Row who's part of this company that would come, probably twice a week. So for the Monday group and the Thursday group. And they would have a specimen collector and they would have an observer to be able to collect the different samples. Now, typically, the other districts have already implemented this. Grades K and 1, who, again, voluntarily participate, we cannot require anyone to do this, but grades K and 1 typically have an adult help them do the swab. And the swab is really no different than, say, like a Q-tip. If you can think about that, it's just going on the inside of your nose. It's absolutely not going up your nose like the real COVID tests, if you've had a real COVID test. This is really just like swabbing the inside of your nose and then putting the swab into a vial that's basically going to hold, 6 or 8 or 10 of these tests. So the K and 1 kids are going to have someone assisting them with the swabbing if they've consented. Typically, again, this is from the other districts that are doing this, grades 2 and up, the students are able to swab themselves. Certainly when you get to late elementary, absolutely middle school and the high school, The kids are just doing it themselves, and they're dropping the swab into the test tube to then have the test run. I see this working at the elementary level, and again, we have to still have all the logistics meetings, that everyone goes into school for the regular classes. So they go to the classroom and they start their day. The nurse and the observer and the specimen collector, may even be the school nurse, so someone from the school, would basically have a cart, and they would roll room to room as the instruction's going on. And if they get to room 1, which is the second grade classroom, and there's 6 kids in that classroom, and the teacher, let's say, that had agreed to pool test, they would come out in the hall, they would do their pool test, they would put their swab, they would put it in the specimen collector, and they'd go right back to class. It literally takes 15 seconds, per student. It would not be a cumbersome thing. It wouldn't be that we're calling everyone down to a central location. We really want to minimize the disruptions to the limited learning time we have. So I see it being like a test on a cart. The staff just goes room to room, have the test done, and they go on their way. At the elementary level, we're likely going to keep a pool to be, depending on the numbers, but a classroom. So if you actually have the kids and the teacher in the same room all during the day, you may as well consider that a pool. So if you have 8 or 10, we'll run room 212 or we'll run room 214, so that if a tube ever came back positive, you know the room it's isolated to, and you don't have students and staff scattered all through the school that could potentially be part of that pool, potentially further exposing other people. That's how I see it happening at the elementary level, room by room, going through on, say, a Monday for the cohort A, going through on a Thursday for the cohort B. In the event, again, on a Tuesday, someone came back positive, a pool came back positive, our nursing staff would coordinate with Peggy to have the Binex PCR test done. That's a 15-minute test they would do on site to identify who was potentially the positive. And then that individual would be referred out to their primary care doctor for follow-up. On the Thursday, same thing would happen on Friday. I've talked a little bit with Peggy and the staff here that what we'll likely do is, let's say everyone's gone home on a Tuesday, right? And the test came back late. Well, we don't want people worrying, or we want to identify who that potential positive is. Or if it was a Friday and everyone's gone home for the weekend and the test results came in after they've already left for the day. We're going to identify probably a central location of the district. Let's even just for argument's sake say it was this building. And it would be like our regional test. So those 10 people would be contacted that said you were part of a positive pool. We'd like you to come between, 6 and 8 o'clock at night, or it's a Saturday morning or whatever. We're going to make someone available. We'll hire someone to actually be here to administer the test. And, figure out who that positive person is, again, just before you have spread. So we're going to also be working on setting up an after-hours process where people can come to a central location, be tested using the PCR, again, just so that we can quickly and efficiently figure out who the positive would be, isolate them, and then be able to get back to business. So elementary school-wise, that's how I see it happening. Any questions on elementary?
Soon.
Do the parents get notified of like a positive or negative?
Parents would only be notified of a positive.
Okay.
So you would only be notified if it was a positive. Everything else is assumed negative.
Would it still follow the same close contact rules?
What do you mean?
So if the pool comes back positive, you're going to test everybody in the room?
No, you have to test everyone in the
Okay,
pool.
that's what I just want to make sure. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, well, you're first just trying to isolate your pool.
Right, got it.
Yeah.
Understood.
And then what I see, I'm sorry.
I just had a question. Does CIC Health or the Meet caregivers have like any type of video or something where they?
You were working on that.
Okay,
Yeah.
because I was thinking about the email that we received that had some very specific questions, and if they had an information page or
Yeah, it's gonna
a
be-
video.
It's part of the consent paperwork.
Okay.
So there'll be like a little overview, and I do get what you're saying.
Okay.
There'll be a little overview of the program. The state actually has a website that has different videos that kind of even show some of this action. We've just got to pick the videos that are going to most align with the way that we're going to do it.
Okay.
And then eventually, I also see, as we've talked to telemedia, creating our own little Chelmsford videos, where we'll take some of our own students as samples and kind of go through and make little videos to show them how we're going to do it. We'll just use the state videos for the
Can
start.
we expect that by March 15th? Do you think we'll have that up and running so the parents can see? Because we want to do the full scale. We want to ramp up to the week of March 15th, and I'd like to have that information out to everyone ahead of time.
Well, yes, they have to, before they can even be considered to participate in the program, they have to consent. So we're gonna have to educate people before they consent,
Right.
to even know what they're consenting to.
Okay.
So, yes, I mean, I really am hoping for tomorrow, but by the end of the week, we have to get something out, and the group knows that.
Okay.
So that people can take, the weekend, take a look at the materials, take a look at the videos. If they have questions, they certainly can ask. If we haven't covered it, we could even think about doing like a little informational session, like a meet or something where people wanted to pop in and ask a question, they could. And then whoever happens to be comfortable and consent for next week, we just may identify them as our sample, so, and again, we're not doing broad samples, but we might just want to do a couple of test tubes per school to give it a try. And we would just know if someone's already consented, that would be a person we would try it with. But I think as the numbers start to add up is when we're going to be able to add capacity for that week of the 15th.
So, let's see.
In addition to video, are you going to be providing some written materials, Q&As, that type of thing? There are some districts out there that have quite extensive Q&As already on pool testing that maybe we can, just borrow
Share.
some of these materials.
We
Yeah.
collaborate.
Yeah,
I like that.
Collaborate.
Collaborate.
Most of them are actually linking to the resources that these companies have put
Okay.
together. It's just a matter of them kind of working with us to make sure that we're linking to the right resources. But yeah, I do think the parents, when they see everything, will have a very good sense of what they're signing into. And then if we find out that they don't, we certainly can follow up with something. But there'll be print materials, there'll be directions to different websites that'll have links to the videos to talk about the program. I think people will be pretty comfortable
Okay.
knowing what they're either signing up for or not.
One of the things that is a concern is also making sure that we collaborate with some districts that have it in other languages and so on, just to make sure that, everybody who wants to do this understands what they're doing.
Yeah, I've seen two different websites. I haven't seen a significant amount of languages in these videos. I've seen English, I've seen Spanish.
Right.
I haven't seen too much beyond that, but I will look and see what we have for resources.
Okay.
So a lot of this would really have to take place next week.
What's that?
A lot of this information, getting this information would have to really be the end of this week, next
Well,
week, all
yes,
of
I mean,
next
the
week.
information, in my opinion, will get out by the end of this week.
Okay.
So that people can kind of have the weekend to digest it and think about it.
All right.
And then as we start to get people consenting next week, again, we'll just may consider them part of a sample.
Okay.
And then the numbers, I think, are gonna start to pick up at that point.
Right.
It may take people a week or two to just kind of see. I mean,
Right.
you might have some kids in a class that want to kind of see what's going on. And then if they realize, well, all you're doing is swabbing the inside of your nose, it's really not that big of a deal. They talk to their friends, maybe they'll sign on for the week after. But I think it will build up some, and I will be able to quantify it for you, but we'll build up, numbers about like who's consented and whatnot. And if we're not hitting a target, we can always come back with the blitz after the fact and really talk about the benefits and why we're trying to do it and whatnot.
Well, I think even if you get most of the kids to consent, right, or a majority,
Yeah.
I mean, if it comes back positive, it gives parents an opportunity that did not opt in to get another test, right, to get a definitive test.
Can you say that again?
Because if somebody tests positive, there's a chance other children
in the
might be
pool.
positive, right, within that pool.
Yeah, I mean, anyone can always get a test on their own if they want to, but anyone in that pool has to retest.
Right. No, I'm with you. So does that include kids that did not opt in? Is the question.
That are close
So if you,
contacts.
but they're close contacts.
Well, no, so if someone, I'm sorry, Dennis.
No.
If someone didn't opt into the program and they didn't test, and they're considered a close contact,
Right.
then they're gonna have to quarantine, and they're gonna have to follow the quarantine guidelines.
Okay.
So, I mean, someone technically can refuse to test. They have to
But then
stay
they would
home
have
for the
to
14 days. Someone can test after so many days to kind of test in, but no, they would still follow our quarantine. If
Okay.
they happen to be within the 6 feet of the individual, they'd be quarantining, whether they consented or not.
So just out of, and I know we spoke about this before and I just don't remember.
Yeah.
What's the cost to the district? It doesn't really matter to me, I'm just curious. Is there a cost?
We're still quantifying.
Is it a big quantify or it's
So-
significant? Okay.
Yeah, so what we're doing is, it's like an à la carte menu when you're working with these different companies, because we just don't have the staff in-house to be able to
You
pull
gotta
this
hire
off.
people.
So we've got to see how much cost is involved with, your collector and your site supervisor and all this. The test itself, I think they say about 10 is the average you would have in a specimen. And the test itself is like $5 to $6 per swab. So, that's not the huge expense. But, if our whole district, because we were looking at worst case scenario, like if our whole district were doing this, you could potentially be looking at about $20,000 per week of testing. The state is willing to pay for the first 6 weeks because they're trying to enhance and really kind of entice people into doing this. And then the ESSER 2 grant that we're gonna receive for like school reopening, and that's even before anything that's gonna come potentially from the federal level, this is an eligible expense under that grant. So yes, it is gonna be, costly. I think we're gonna have state funding to support us probably until like April vacation. We're probably on our own for 7 weeks after April vacation. And we're gonna have to just take a look at the numbers and, the effectiveness of the program. It could be $100,000 to $150,000 between now and June, and these are ballpark numbers.
Yep.
Between now and June, but I'll certainly report to you what it's gonna cost.
Yep.
It's not cheap.
It's not cheap, but I think the thing is to have, if you want to reopen schools, and if you want people back in the classroom for longer periods, or whatever plan we decide to go forward with, we're gonna need the pool testing. I won't support it without pool testing, whatever Desi says. So, that's all, my comment.
The questions I have so far, I want to hear what's going to happen at the middle and the high
Yeah, so let me
school.
switch to the
Can't
middle and the
wait.
high school.
Yeah. for
Very
the
exciting,
pools.
very exciting coming
Oh,
along.
yeah.
All right, so the significant difference I see at the middle and the high school level is what we will likely do is set up, say at the high school, a set testing station. The kids moving around at the high school too much to be able to track them from class to class, because you would never be able to go through in one period, getting all your rooms done, and then you'd be like chasing your tail trying to get the kids in the next class they're in. So let's just say we would utilize one of the CAFs in the high school, near the main office, and we would actually set up several stations where the testing could be done. The staff and students would just walk into school like it's a regular day on their particular test day. So in their mind, they'd have to remember, am I a Monday or am I a Thursday? But, if it's a Monday and I'm a Monday tester, I walk into the CAF, I walk over to one of the tables, I, sign in or whatever we're gonna have to do to make sure that you're allocated to that test pool. The student self-swabs, there's an observer just watching them, but the student self-swabs, puts the test in the sample, and they go about their business. So, it's 15 to 30 seconds, basically to come in. We're gonna try to streamline it as best we can as far as like the identification of the person to the test tube, and then they go on their way. We're gonna have to work again with the company to just kind of figure out, how many stations can we set up. We absolutely can't cross-contaminate the pools, because that would be a disaster if you ever had a positive come back and you're tracking down the whole school. So we've got to have some very specific stuff in place, but that's what that Meet Caregivers and CIC is really kind of gonna help us with. But students come in, they say go into the CAF, they swab in their own, they put it in the tube, and then they go about their business. So that's how I see it working at the high school. And largely, we still have to have the meeting with the middle school, but, the kids at the middle school level, particularly 5th and 6th grade, stay together as a group a little bit more. You could track them down if you had to by room, if they decided to go room to room. But I honestly think it might just be more efficient to have a centralized location, and people just come, they swab, and they go about their business. So that's the one thing at the middle school we have to still kind of tweak a little bit. But the high school, I see it definitely being like a self-serve. You walk up, you swab, and you go.
Would the pools be by grade, like, would freshmen have one area to go to? And
Where the kids are not together, or the students aren't together all day, it really doesn't matter at that level. So as long as we know who the 10 people in that pool are, we could reach out to those 10 people and quickly, grab them, flag them as a potential positive, and give the Binex test. That doesn't matter. I just think it makes more practical sense, even talking to the group at the elementary level where the kids are just together the whole day, to do that as a pool. But again, you see a little bit more movement at the middle school level, and certainly you see, the high school is running, basically like a regular schedule. So you're gonna be in multiple classes with different kids. It's not quite as important at that level. It's just critical that when you sign into your pool for that day, your test is run in the right pool.
Okay, couple of questions. So, in determining pools at the high school level, or any place where sports are being run and activities, I don't know what other districts do that are doing it already, because there are many that have been doing it for quite some time. Do they create a pool for particular teams or whatever, or no?
No, I have not heard that.
Okay.
Because again, the students, even though let's just say they're on, it's over now, but let's just say they're on the basketball team. That is just like one pocket of students that they're around during the day. But they're in different classes throughout the course of the day. So at the high school level, everyone I've talked to hasn't been as concerned about doing that.
All right. How about people who have already been vaccinated? Is staff going to be part of the same pool, or is it a separate pool? Or how does that work?
We'll say at the high school level, it honestly, in my opinion, wouldn't matter if you're part of a pool with students or not, because you've got exposure to the different kids during the day. So staff could come in and test, and it's just gonna be a matter of convenience in the lines of which one you end up in and which one you test in. They don't have to be isolated at that level. I think it makes sense at the elementary level, again, because they're in the same room all day with the same kids. But at the high school, where they're seeing 3 or 4 different groups of kids over the course of the day, it doesn't matter as much that they're in the same pool. There's no like real pool to put them in.
Okay.
We just have to be careful that we just have to match our pool. The 10 people have to be clearly identified to that pool for the test. That's the critical piece.
Okay, now, you have a pool tested, and you want to have the night service or whatever it is that people can go to, so they don't have to be in doubt for a long period of time whether they're positive or truly positive. What happens to that entire pool? Quarantines until the test result is back? How does this work?
No, and this has changed a little bit along the way like everything else. So let's just say you had 10 people, right, at the high school, 10 random people, you had 3 staff and 7 students that were part of a pool that came back positive. The pool was initiated on Monday, the results came back on Tuesday. So if we're still in school, then the nursing staff would get an alert saying you had a positive pool. These 10 people need to be checked. So they would, hopefully, those 10 people would be in school that day. They would contact them immediately, come on down to the nurse's office or whatnot, wherever we're gonna set up, and administer the Binax test to figure out there's at least one in the pool that's gonna be positive, to figure out who it is. My concern was that, let's say the school day had ended and everyone already went home. I don't wanna have people waiting, for a day or two if you know there's a potential positive in the case. So we would contact those 10 people and have like an after-hour place that they could go. It's not gonna be as efficient to run, say, 8 of them, right, one at each of the schools, because you never know if there's a positive pool. It might just make sense to staff just one. We'll work with our nurses and offer them, extra compensation if they wanna kind of man the pool that night in the event that we have to run the Binax test. And people would come to one location. So those 10 people, we would say come to that location. Originally, it wasn't DESI, so this might have been EEOH, the Health and Human Service Group, was talking about almost quarantining the 10 people in the pool until they knew who the positive was. They changed the guidance on that and basically said, if we weren't doing pool testing, we wouldn't have known, because these people are asymptomatic, we wouldn't have known that they actually had COVID anyway. So that was overkill to basically quarantine them. So their direction at this point is just contact those 10 people immediately, have them come in for the Binax test. What we want to, as a practice, do is ideally catch them before they go home that next day, or catch them before they reintroduce themselves to school. But I think as long as we have that kind of extra center set up to be able to do the testing, we'd be able to do that hopefully that evening. Or in a case of, say, like a Friday test that didn't come back, I don't want to wait till Monday to find out who the person is. We may offer, say, a Friday evening, or we might offer a Saturday morning, and people could come and get the Binax test.
Anna, you had a question?
So I just wanted to clarify, but the goal is not to have these people be back in the general population, possibly infecting people, is to have them go someplace to have the rapid test, right, to determine who the positive case was.
Yeah, ideally, like I said, we would be able to do it at school if we get the test results and the people are there. If not, to set up that location so that we can very quickly, get them in and try to identify which of the, say, 10 people was the positive.
Is the Binax test, the rapid one, how fast does that come
15
back?
minutes.
15 minutes?
Yeah.
That's great.
No, and literally they're in my office.
Yeah.
I just don't know how to do them. But no, you would actually just come and do the test.
Oh, so they know right
Yeah, the
then.
nurse has a little timer. You wait till the test is done and they know. Yeah.
All right, other questions on pool testing?
I think just for me, not a question, just to focus on getting as much information out on the process and how we're going to accomplish it. I think
Well, I
there's a
know.
lot of questions about how.
Right.
Yeah. So that's my emphasis.
Yeah. And the other thing that a lot of people have asked me is, what happens with notifications? I think, so you said they come in, they get that Binax test or whatever it is,
Oh.
and you identify one particular person.
Yep, so let's back up a second. I moved my slide too because I was talking about this, but I didn't have the dates up there. So when we do the regular pool, right, we're all logged into like a centralized site with CIC to see the test results come back as they're processed. So if a pool is negative and 10 people were part of a negative pool, they're not notified. It's assumed you're negative, so there's no notification on that. If a pool comes back positive, the computer alerts us that there's a positive pool, and then those 10 people would manually be contacted to say that you were part of a positive pool. Right, they're gonna get a phone call. It's not just an email that goes out because we wanna get to them quickly. You were part of a positive pool, we need you to come and take a follow-up test, the PCR test. So if you're in school, you can just come right then, you've already given consent, and we can administer the test. If you're home or whatnot, we're gonna say, you need to come to, say, central office during these hours and have the test. And you're gonna give the specimen, and then you're gonna wait for the 15 minutes to see if you're positive or not. So if you're negative, the nurse is gonna say, Maria, you're negative, you have nothing to worry about, you can go about your business. Dennis, you came back positive, you're now quarantined, you need to follow up with your medical provider. That's how it would work.
Okay.
And then if that were to happen, the close contact
Will
kicks
be
in.
contacted.
So if Dennis was positive, then yes, we'd have to do the close contact tracing on anyone that came in contact with Dennis. I know it's a lot, and we're trying to make it manageable for people. So once I do think that consolidated consent is gonna be helpful, because it's gonna be hard for our parents to sign off on one consent, never mind if we sent them out 3 different ones. I could see that just being a nightmare to try to track. Someone would have thought they consented to this, they really didn't. We can't do anything unless we have all 3 consents. And we are gonna put, some literature out, as well as links to videos to kind of talk about how this will all work. And obviously, hopefully that's gonna work, we'll get good participation. Other districts are doing this, and they're getting good participation. But I think it might take people a week or 2 to kind of see it in practice, and then they'll be comfortable with it, and hopefully we'll get more and more people to start signing on to it.
I know one school where they've done it, they were a test site,
Okay.
and it's just second nature. It's just understood, you go, you do it, and it's just like a regular practice.
It's become automated.
My sons have been doing it at college, all fall, it's a very similar test. They just know, they actually have to go twice a week. They literally just go to school 15 minutes before class, they walk into the testing area, they swab, they give their sample, and they go about their business. It really does become second nature. And again, I think this is just like another level of, like mitigation strategy to make people more comfortable, to try to identify if there are any cases, so that we can stop that spread before it really happens.
What's the impact on busing and getting the students to school on time to do this and so on? If we're gonna do it earlier in the day, that type of thing?
It wouldn't really impact us significant busing wise, because at the elementary level, again, the students are just taking the regular buses, and I see them doing this in their classrooms. At the middle school level, well, no, I see the person kind of going around. At the middle school level, maybe a little bit more of an impact, we're just gonna have to watch the scheduling of this, but I could see the students just being routed when they come into school to, say, the testing center. That are the details we have to work through. At the high school level, we really don't have many students riding the bus, so I don't see this being an issue, busing-wise. It's, parents may have to drop off a few minutes early, but, or the students just during the course of the day are gonna have to figure out when they have a couple minutes, between class even, when they can get swabbed and then go on to the next class. We'll figure out the logistics.
All right, any other questions on pool testing? So hopefully by next
So
meeting
hopefully
we'll.
by this, hopefully by next meeting we'll have one.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a way that we could even, do a sample ourselves, so you could give it a try, and the audience could kind of watch us doing it. But I think people really aren't gonna have a big issue with it once they see how, really, it's not intrusive
I
at
think
all.
it's a great idea. Doing it here during a
Yeah,
meeting?
we'll give it a try.
I would do it.
I'm
Put it on
already
the
doing it.
agenda.
Donna,
I'm already doing it.
you want to
Or
do
you
it
could
again?
do it with us.
I'm already doing it. Yes.
Have you,
fine, that's
have
fine.
you started already?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
And
How's the process? Has it been good? Has it
is
been?
it good? Is the process good?
Yeah, it's a good process. You know, I think, you know, tracking people down is part of the is part of the problem. So I think having the place, because ours is where the cart goes around.
Oh,
But, you know, it's not just students you're trying to track down, it's also staff.
right,
You know, so I think having a central location is a good idea.
right. Particularly at the secondary level.
Mm.
You know, that's gotta be tough.
All right.
All right, so that was a little bit on pool testing. More to follow, and really, hopefully, that information is gonna go up by the weekend, so that people can get some ideas. So a lot of questions about in-person learning. I wanted to kind of talk about where we've been, where we're at, clear up a couple of misnomers, and then talk about plans for phasing in some additional return to school later on this school year.
Jake, before you start that, I was wondering, so some information came out from Commissioner Riley and the governor last week, and, you know, if you could just kind of touch on that, and then what direction we're going in, you know, as we take a look at our plan, so that people are, I mean, I think there's been a lot of information out there, and I think it's just, it's, I think, hard to understand it. I'm having a hard time understanding it myself, you
Yeah.
know, what the impact is.
And I'll be honest with you, we haven't received clear directive from, say, DESI on this. So we're hearing a lot of just anecdotal stuff, too. We
Okay.
listened in on a couple of calls. I was actually on a call today to get a little information about this. And what appears happened about maybe 2 weeks back or so at the Board of Education meeting. I think Commissioner Riley kind of previewed for them, I don't know if it was an official meeting or not, but he previewed for them his plan to try to get students and schools basically reopened more fully. And there is a Board of Ed meeting on Friday where his plan is going forward to basically alter the regulations on learning time and what would be acceptable. And his recommendation, again, we don't know if it's going to pass, it's not going to pass, or whatnot, calls for a set date. I believe it's the first week in April. It's around the Monday the 5th or something, where if the board acts on this, it would basically do away with hybrid learning. And what they would be imposing on districts is the choice of either remote learning. So if you've had students who are fully remote, what he's at least indicated is that for the rest of this year, this isn't me, this is, you know, for the rest
It's
of.
not directed at you, it's directed through you to somebody else.
So for the rest of this year, if you were fully remote, you could remain fully remote through June. So that would be an option, 5 days a week remote, never coming into school. The hybrid option that we have going on now is basically, under his recommendations, would go away. And hybrid learning would have to become full 5 day a week, full in-person learning as of that date in April. Again, I'm just the messenger. I don't know how this is going to play out or whatnot.
I have so many questions.
And the, it might be more appropriate for the 16th, just because we'll know more what's going to happen. And
Yeah.
I'm honestly, I don't have,
I was just hoping you kind of set the stage.
oh,
you know
here's the
what I'm saying?
stage, right? So
Okay.
in his model would be that the hybrid would go away, and that everyone would be 5 days a week as of that date in April. They're following guidance from, I guess, local and regional medical advisors that basically indicate, and there is data to document that we have not seen COVID spread, you know, within schools and particularly the young children community. The World Health Organization, not the CDC, but the World Health Organization has recommended 3-foot distancing as opposed to 6-foot distancing within classrooms. And they have seen within countries worldwide, not just the US, that the 3-foot distancing is sufficient, and they're still maintaining low to no spread within schools. And, you know, basically, what it would mean from our standpoint is they would be disqualifying, like if this is passed, they would be disqualifying our hybrid learning days. They wouldn't count towards time on learning. Because what he's doing is basically saying, as a DESI regulation, you have to have a full in-person 5 day a week program to qualify as a academic learning day. So, again, I'm just the messenger. So, you know, the threat from DESI would be If you don't comply, then you don't qualify as a full learning day, and we're not going to provide funding for that day of non-instruction. So, and again, this is early on, this is kind of I think a little bit of the posturing phase too. But, they're talking about, not providing Chapter 70 funding, making you ineligible
We'd be
for.
devastated without that. That's a joke. Continue, I'm
We
sorry.
do get a little, not with being eligible to receive grants, things along those lines. So I think we have to see how this is gonna play out for the next, week or two. I don't know what's gonna happen at the board meeting on Friday. That'll obviously be interesting. Certainly, this has got everyone riled up, because it was news to me when I heard about it, really on the call today was when they firmed it up, but like a week and a half ago, when they just nonchalantly talked about this.
Bingo.
Press conference.
Yeah,
So,
we was-
It was just a week.
Yeah.
Hey, can I just, God, I have so many questions. No, I mean, if they pass it Friday, which I don't know why I looked at my wrist, but I mean, you're talking the 5th, they're giving you 3 weeks to figure it out?
A month,
No
basically.
rant, that's not a month, that's 3 weeks.
No, April 5th.
Oh, is it April? Okay, it's 30 days.
Oh, no, I know. You'd have like a month to work on all of this. And a month to now go back to, because not, like us, and this is what I was going to touch on a little bit, like in our return to school plan and even our agreements with unions around like reopening, we agreed to a 6-foot distancing. And a lot of districts did that because that was the recommendation at the time.
And it's working.
What's that?
And it's working.
And it's working. And again, from their perspective, what they're gonna say is 3 foot would have worked. I think we just need to wait for the board meeting on Friday, because it's, that piece is really out of our control. There is a lot of pushback around the implementation of this, whole program, what it would really mean. I think what I have kind of garnered from it and taken, even when I've started talking to staff, is that we realize we have to start making these plans for return to school. That I think there is a way that's very logical for Chelmsford to start phasing back in more in-person learning. We've been successful really throughout the fall, far better than I think a lot of people would have thought, and even given us credit for. It's gone very well. I would hope that we would be able to make an argument for our sustained, continued phasing in of programming, that we continue to have a full remote option for people. We're going to get to these phases in a little bit, but it's a show of good faith to try to start to increase some in-person learning. And if we are able to do this and kind of have 5 days a week of in-person learning going on, I know it wouldn't mean originally all kids all day for the 5 days, but I think that would be a big statement going in the right direction, coupled with, we do have to get on the horizon of, like, once we do have the vaccines and staff are vaccinated, I think that's going to be the time to start talking about, do we do some modifications to rooms to be able to take more students in, to be able to come back to school more fully. And I do touch on this later in the slide, but that's kind of the scuttlebutt, Donna, on what's happening, and I do know that everyone's kind of freaking out about it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But it's not coming from us. This is more the,
So the meeting's
the
Friday.
state doing this.
So the meeting's
Yeah,
Friday
state-
and we'll have an answer.
The Board of Ed meeting on Friday.
And we can talk about this next week.
Well, we can, but that was a question that I've gotten quite a bit of, which is, if we are going to change rules so that we get full in-person at any level, would it require a vote of the school committee in order to eliminate the 6-foot distance change that would be required?
All these are good questions, right? There's some gray area in some of these. And we would have to obviously involve our legal counsel in the discussions. In the discussions we were on today with a number of different attorneys on the matter, if there's a regulation that basically, from proclamated from DESE or from the state, like, we don't know exactly where this is gonna come from. And let's say the 6-foot distancing is not required, the 3-foot distancing is required. Yes, there are bargaining implications, you would have to negotiate, but, there are different levels of negotiation that are required. So we would have to have discussions around that. We couldn't fall back and just say, we have 6-foot distancing, we can never go back to school. They would definitely push us to go in the direction of reducing the distancing to go into school. And I do think we need to wait and let this kind of play out, because there are just so many different implications with when you have a regulation and you don't comply. Yes, it affects funding. It affects also like secondary levels that we wouldn't even be thinking about right now, but it can come up with, say, like, like special education could be impacted. Any kind of like compensatory services for special ed could come into play. If you're operating an unregulated program, there's legal issues with that. There's just a whole bunch of different issues. And I think,
I'm sorry, what that sounds like to me is the state using the power of the purse to force school committees to make decisions about reopening if this passes. That's what that is.
Exactly what it is.
Yeah, you're not gonna get grants, set Chapter 70, da-da-da-da-da. So we're gonna bankrupt your school if you don't open your doors.
They can't do that. They're not gonna do that.
I'm just saying.
Yeah.
One thing I did read,
do that, but-
so I did go read into that, and one of the things I did, there was some kind of mention of exceptions. You can apply for exceptions. And so I think we just need to wait till
we have to really just see what gets voted on. And again, I think our programming, I think we can make a good argument that the programming we'll put in place, and even that we're gonna talk about trying to put in place, is substantive, and I think moves in the right direction. And I would hope that, in the scheme of things, Chelmsford is not a district that's on their radar for not doing this well. There's probably some districts, there are some districts that are still fully remote, have never had a day in person. Those are districts, I think, the state, that wasn't intended at you, Don.
But they're pool testing.
No, there are some school districts that just have not come in. So let's talk about getting them at least half-time in. I can't imagine if we were a fully remote district and all of a sudden you were told to go fully in person. There's got to be some incremental steps that are taken. And I think, what I want to lay out for you is, I think, a logical, number of steps and dates to be looking at. And I think we would make a compelling argument to the state that, the way we're doing it, to have some faith in us, can get us in the end to probably where they want to be. But to just, rip the Band-Aid off and have everyone go back in person on the 5th just presents a whole other level of issues. And I think after your board meeting on Friday, if that is passed, within the next week or so, and we can talk about this at our next meeting, that's when you'll start to really see pushback from all these different groups, and we'll have to figure out what is really gonna be practical, what is not practical, what's political, what's not political. That's when things will start to shake out.
These decisions are our choice. They're
So
not
let's,
the state's choice.
let's hear the,
Yeah,
the
so,
options.
prior to kind of, talking a little bit of that board action, a couple of things that I did want to just put out there, because I have gotten these questions from parents, is around the remote students. So currently, or even under the governor's recommendation, I just want to assure, families of students who have selected to be fully remote for the year, that they're going to have that option to stay fully remote. So if you were a fully remote student, you do not come to our schools, you're participating from home, you have a remote teacher, you have a remote class, those students are able to stay fully remote through the end of June. So I just want to clear that up, because sometimes we say, well, if we go back to full in person, does that mean we have to come back? And the state is saying that we have to provide that full remote option, at least for this school year. I don't know what next year brings, but at least for this school year, I want people to know that there's certainty that they're going to be able to keep their remote option for the year. Secondly, for our hybrid kids, as of right now, we agreed to the 6-foot distancing in the classrooms, and that included, keeping the desks 6 feet apart. This was negotiated, as I mentioned, in our return to school plans. It's in our MOUs with the unions that we're going to maintain that distancing. And, some parents will, and we've received some emails from parents who really want us to go back full in person, and I absolutely get it. I mean, in an ideal world, we would. We physically cannot accommodate a full classroom right now, keeping the 6-foot distancing. And that's what's in our agreements, that we would actually have to, go and negotiate to change. So we can, on average, fit, 10 to 12, maybe 13 desks in a classroom, keeping that 6-foot distancing. And for my work here tonight, what we're going to talk about, I do not contemplate changing that 6-foot distancing, because it would require the negotiation, which would take some time. Now, again, I don't know the implications of Friday's vote and what that could change, but everything we're going to talk about tonight assumes maintaining 6-foot distancing, and that we're not going back on that.
Under remote, is that a typo?
Oh, what does it say?
2021-22 school year?
Yes, it's the 2021.
Yeah.
Can I ask a quick
Please.
question about remote? So if we started increasing in-person time, people could go back into the remote program though, right now?
Yeah, the problem, I just don't know
I
what.
don't think
that-
they would. I'm just
I don't think they would either, but I don't know what that would pose for us staffing-wise. Because there were all these different just staffing issues that are gonna come up, whether we, had a bunch more kids that wanted to go remote, or if we had this push for full in-person, that may raise some other staffing issues if we have some staff that just are not able to or want to go back full in person. We could be hit with a bunch of staff who ask for leaves and things like that. And obviously, it's very difficult to staff the programs we have now. That's one of our issues. So that would present a whole bunch of challenges.
Just stuff to think about.
And but Donna, I'm glad you picked that up. So this was for this year, 2021. I must have just had.
Wasn't me that picked it up.
Huh?
Just want you to know, people are reading your slides.
Oh, good, okay.
Yeah.
But no, this is for the current school year is what I was talking about. So for the current school year, everyone can stay remote. Next year, we just don't know what's gonna happen yet with anything. So this is only for this year. But I just want everyone to know that all of this planning and kind of discussion we're doing, even when we're talking about additional classes and kids coming into school and how we might want to continue to phase this, it maintains the 6-foot distancing. So that's all part of the discussion that we're gonna have. I wanted to just touch base on you and kind of give you an update about some of our sub-separate programs that we already have in the schools, because a lot of them over the course of the fall and even the winter have added learning time with the teachers and the support staff and the parents of these particular programs since the start of the school year. So just going school by school, just to let you know, our PAVES program, our life skills program at the high school, they had switched to 4 full days of instruction at some point this past fall or winter. And Wednesdays was a fully remote day, but they're actually been planning, again, just with the staff and the parents, about having Wednesdays be a half in-person day. So it's likely as early as tomorrow, if the consents with the parents happened, or probably next week at the latest, that program at the high school would be 4 full days, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and then a half in-person day on Wednesday. The Wednesday afternoon would be planning and prep time for the teachers, so there'd be no instruction in the afternoon. But those students have been afforded a full-day program at the high school in that particular program. Our NEC autism class at the high school also has 4 full days. So those students come in Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and then Wednesday is a completely remote day for them. And at this point in time, there has not been discussion about that going to be a half in-person day. Right now, 4 full days and 1 fully remote day. McCarthy Middle School, students in the life skills program over at McCarthy, the whole cohort has been going for 4 half days. So they've been coming in Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and then they have a remote day on Wednesdays. Parker in our autism program, our NEC classroom, they actually go for 4 full days. So they go Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday full, and their whole day on Wednesday is remote. But those kids are at least getting in for a full day, those 4 days a week, which is great. BIAM, our autism program, currently is 4 half days. Again, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and Wednesday is a full remote day. But I do know that the staff and parents have, the staff have definitely talked, and they're reaching out to the parents to see if they would like to also transition to a half day on Wednesdays, just to get some more in-person time. The nice thing about these substantially separate programs is most of the students in these programs, if they have transportation from the district, it's all specialized transportation. So these aren't students who are transported on our big school buses. They would have a special transport, so it's much easier to coordinate the pickup and drop-offs because a lot of them have home-to-home transportation. At Center Elementary School, our life skills classroom, they're going for a half day, so they go together as a cohort. And then Wednesday is a full remote day for them. South Row, our Strive classroom, they've been going for 4 half days and full remote day on Wednesday. And then since the beginning of the school year, our CHIPS programs, our intensive classrooms, have been going for 4 half days, and they're 4-hour days, so it's a full block. And our integrated classrooms at the CHIPS program have been going for 4 half days as well, but it's a half day, so it's a 2-hour block. So that's been happening at our schools with our substantially separate programs. And just wanted to kind of update you with that. And again, some of these changes have been implemented throughout the fall and the winter, and really we received very good feedback from staff and the parents at this point. And the parents in those programs are really integral, and they work very closely with the teachers and the support staff, and all of that has really worked very well.
So on those programs that you've just gone through, what's the percentage of students in those programs who are fully remote?
I don't know off the top of my head. I mean, I could
Okay.
certainly try to find out for you. I will
Okay.
tell you that it's minimal.
Yes, please, because, we're talking about a limited number of seats here that we have in the schools right now because of the 6-foot distancing and
Yeah.
so on, right? So, let's say that we have 30% of those students who are fully remote. Under the current program as it exists with a 6-foot distance, if we only have 10 seats available, and people want to come back, we may not be able to accommodate fully. So I'm just trying to figure out what the percentage is that is not in school right now, and because I'm assuming that you're offering the half day is to students that are currently in school. Is that correct? Who are currently hybrid?
No, so these programs, I think you have to think a little bit differently than like the other programs we have in the district. Because to get into one of these programs, you would have to have an IEP that specifically is for, let's say at center school, the life skills program. So any of the students that wanted to be fully in person, we would have to find space for them. It wouldn't be an option. So if a student has an IEP and they want to be in person, we would have to find the space. We don't have that issue. Most of these classes would have, say, 6 to 8 students in them.
So you don't have the 6-foot social distancing issue in any one of these, even if you bring back the fully remote students?
But there's no one to bring back in these. I guess that's what I'm getting at. I can find out how many. I'm sure there are a couple of students that
But
did
it's
stay
only a
fully
couple.
remote, but it's already encompassed within these
Okay.
programs. And you wouldn't have anyone else from the school ever joining one of these programs.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
The numbers are small in general.
Yeah, the numbers, yeah.
Yeah.
And to be honest with you, with regards to the 6-foot distancing, it's almost impossible with some of these programs. The kids require such a high degree of assistance that maintaining 6 feet is,
Yeah, I'm just wondering, within these programs, we basically have all the students already in school?
yes, well, I don't know.
Is that
Yes,
true?
Most of them would be, and again, I will find out for sure for you.
Okay.
That, I wasn't anticipating that question. Because these kids, we couldn't have said, you have to stay remote, we don't have the room for you, but the room has never
Right,
been.
at the beginning, I remember
Right.
that this was
But
required and so on.
the room has never been an issue for any of these programs.
All right.
But as Donna said, even though we would have, say, spacing within the classroom to have 6 or 8 desks, just the very nature of this population, the staff are having to interact very closely with them, which I think is, part of their concern, and I absolutely get it because of just the close proximity. This is the group that I was mentioning earlier in the day as far as vaccines concerned. This group just got moved up to be technically as part of that phase 1 because the
right.
behavioral health providers within an ed setting.
Right.
So these individuals, your teachers and your support staff, are now eligible to go and get the vaccine. So we're going to be trying to push and reach out to them to be able to do that.
Okay.
The very nature of their job, I mean, as much as we try to keep distance, a lot of these students just need more direct
Right.
care, and it's just inevitable that you can't maintain 6 feet distance.
So far, in all the students that you've described,
Yep.
there were about all of them already in person.
I'm going to tell you the vast majority of these students are in person.
Okay.
Yeah, it's if someone had picked a remote in one of these programs, it was largely because of a health issue.
Okay.
Yeah.
I noticed that at the middle school and the high school, our autism program is in full days, but at Byam, they're in half days. Is there any particular reason for that?
Yeah, they obviously are going to. All of our schools are kind of having discussions about even just with these populations of increasing learning time. I know the elementary schedule is somewhat different, and even like programming wise, what they do at that school. The buy-in program is very staff intensive, and I know that earlier in the fall it really wasn't a possibility just because of some of the extra staff that we would have had to hire.
Okay.
But I think they actually had recently met and talked about adding the half day on the Wednesdays, which I think is a good idea and a good first step. I could see them eventually getting to a full day, but we are going to have to potentially add some extra staff just to make that work.
And then don't we have a Strive type program at McCarthy?
Yeah, we do. I may have just missed that,
Okay,
that
I was just
classroom.
wondering, I just want to make sure, I thought I missed something.
No, you're correct. I'll follow up with you on that in a separate email. But they do have that program, because that's the feeder from Centro. So I wanted to kind of just give you a sense for like these substantially separate programs and just some of the,
How about ELs? Did you include those in the special populations, or how did that work?
so the Ls wouldn't be in a substantially separate program. They would be in the next year that we talked about. Like, we don't have special classrooms or separate programs for the Ls. They'd be integrated into the general ed classrooms.
Okay.
Okay?
I've
And,
been to one of their separate classrooms, but I mean, they gather when it was
No,
in
they
person.
gather in it,
Yeah.
but they wouldn't be necessarily in that room by themselves
Yes, all the
day.
time, yeah.
And to Donna's point, I will follow up separate with you. I'll get you an
Sure.
email on the,
Yeah, I was just
on
curious.
the
I
copy.
didn't see them.
So then when we transition a little bit to speaking about some of our general ed programs in the district and increasing learning opportunities, what's happened and what we can even look for going forward. We have severely limited capacity at the elementary level just because of the number of students who picked in-person learning, whether it was in cohorts A or B. At the middle school level, it's definitely limited. Most of our seats are full. There are a handful of seats that aren't. And at the high school level, ironically, there is capacity just about across the board for additional kids to be able to take seats, maintaining the 6-foot distancing. The enrollment at the high school is really, ironically, the lowest compared to the other schools in totality, and they have the most capacity. In an ideal world, I would love to have that capacity at the elementary level, because if we could bring back the, the K1s, 2s, even as some of the speakers have talked about, I mean, you'd have a huge impact from doing that. We physically don't have space right now, keeping the distancing at the elementary level to do that. And we're almost seeing the reverse, where our space is at the high school level, and then it gets gradually less at the middle and even less at the elementary. So the way that the schools have approached this, when we look about prioritizing students at this point in time, if we have available seats in individual classrooms or across grade levels, for students to either come 2 days a week. So if these were remote students that want to now transition into some in-person time and come 2 days a week, which would be like first to try to get everyone 2 days if they want it. And then if we still have openings, to try to see if there's populations that really need 4 days a week of programming. At the elementary level, the most we've really been able to accomplish, and going forward, even when there's a seat that's identified, would be our high needs populations. So this would be any of our students who are on an IEP, maybe our L students who are receiving certain services. When they have a team meeting about a student, or if there's a student that really is, just struggling, they're able to identify those particular students, prioritize them, to be able to either come in from remote to in-person for the 2 days a week, or again, if they've all been satisfied and there's an extra seat or two, to be able to say, if this student's really struggling, meets these criteria, we would like them to come the extra 2 days so that they can get 4 days of instruction. So at the elementary level, really the most we can do at this point in time, given the distancing, is the high needs populations, which would be the special ed and the L.
So, because maybe I didn't understand this well enough, all of the other programs you just talked about, where you said that it's very few students who are not there already,
At the elementary.
which shows remote, they are, this high needs population that you list under elementary school level that we're discussing now is more than this pool of students that we've just discussed previously.
And which pool?
People who are in
Different group from
the
the
cave, neck.
Oh, it's a totally, yeah. So
Totally
that
different
first group we talked about, almost kind of think of them as like a separate program, and now this is a different one. So this is
Okay.
a different group of kids.
So I think numbers would be important here if you can provide them, because, what are we looking at in terms of what's the high needs population's number out there, and how many seats do we have available? Just to really understand that,
Right.
and get a good picture of how many students are we talking about that can actually return in person at the elementary, middle school, and so on, at these
Yeah,
levels.
see, the problem is at the and I can do this for you, I just couldn't do it for tonight. It's not many. We really do not have
Okay,
many
but
seats at
it
all.
would be good to know, so people
Right.
have a good
But I'm just saying,
picture.
we can't even work through all of the special education and L students. We don't have enough capacity to even be able to go beyond that at the elementary level.
So the elementary is just totally off now.
Yes, and like if they do have a seat that becomes open, then they have to talk about who would be the student that would best benefit from being in that seat.
Okay.
And they go by priority of like intensity of needs based on, say, an IEP or needing in-service time. So I'm just trying to express to you that we don't have, we really do not have a lot of capacity to add additional, say, a general ed student for additional time in the schools. What they've had to do is really prioritize the high-needs populations at the elementary level, because we are seeing, you know, your 8 to 10 or 11 students per class in any, at all times.
Okay.
We're not seeing that at the other level.
And we really can't, I suppose we could, but we really can't utilize areas like the cafeteria or the gym and things like that, correct? Or are those, because at some point, if we're increasing the
Right.
length of the day, we need those areas.
Yes, I mean, we could potentially there's nothing stopping us from doing that on an interim basis. But if we do get to, like, say, phase 2 and phase 3,
Right.
then those spaces would need to be learning spaces.
Right.
So it would be a short-term, kind of a stopgap measure if we stayed like in the halftime program we had.
Okay.
So the reason we're not opting to use common spaces like the cafeteria and libraries and so on is what you just stated.
What's that?
You just said it would be an interim thing,
We're
possibly.
gonna need them for the next.
No, I'm saying
In order to
we
create more
certainly,
space at the elementary
we
level.
could be doing that right now. I'm just saying, to Donna's point, was that if we start to go from, say, a half day to a full day
Uh-huh.
or whatnot, then we're gonna need those spaces.
Okay.
So there's nothing stopping a school right now. Let's say it was a library and it was a bigger space and you had a class that we needed to get 14 or 15 students in, and they didn't fit in the confines of the regular class. If the school wanted to make a decision to move that class to the library to get an extra couple of seats in, they certainly could do that.
But it's one class that.
It's one class. It's not gonna resolve
Doesn't
like the
affect
whole.
it doesn't
the whole
help anywhere
thing,
else,
yeah.
yeah.
And to make it totally clear, right now, if we were to create an additional class in the library to bring back more elementary students, we basically don't have the staff, is that correct?
And we don't have a library.
Yeah.
But we don't have
Staffing would be an issue.
Uh-huh.
And it would be like, unfortunately, the staff would be coming from a remote assignment, so the remote assignment would get smaller. Not enough that we could actually move the remote assignment in. And we wouldn't probably have a staff member to be able to fill that classroom. And one classroom
we're
isn't
done.
gonna satisfy the school. You'd almost need multiple, because you'd have a class or two at each grade level. That would be necessary to do that.
Okay, so it's also staff.
Staffing is an issue for us.
Okay, middle school?
Okay. So at the middle school, again, we have a little bit more room than they have at the elementary school level. So what they have done first is high needs populations, again, very similar to the elementary. They've tried to identify special education students based on IEPs that could use additional in-person time, L students that could use additional in-person time, and then in the extra capacity that they may have, if they still have a couple of extra seats in a classroom, targeting those students who are really struggling academically, who now after, say, 1 or 2 semesters, who really just are failing and not engaging in school. The first thing, a lot of them are remote, the first thing to do would be to try to contact them, to convince them to try to come in for at least the 2 days a week. If they still won't, or if they still have openings and there are seats available, then there are other students who would benefit from the 2 days a week going to 4 days a week. So again, at the middle school level, we have very good enrollment, so you're not gonna see many seats, but it may be sporadic, a class here or there that has a couple of extra seats. And again, at the middle school level, the kids are still together, the students are still together by and large a lot during the day as a group. It's not like the high school where they're in, say, 4 different classes.
7 and 8 is different.
7 and 8 a little bit, right? But, you know, like say your 5th and 6th, most of the time you get 2 cohorts, so they're only traveling between two teachers. So you have a little bit better sense of numbers. But the priority at that level would be special ed, L, and then struggling students. So that's what the schools are trying to work on at this point in time to to target, and if there's any available seats, again, keeping the 6-foot distancing, but trying to reintroduce some kids either to school who haven't been there at all, or to provide more schooling opportunity to students who are there, say, 2 days but need 4 days. That's the order that they're trying to prioritize bringing students back in.
And this is a level where we saw a lot of students struggling. You know, when we saw the grade reports, this is where, you know.
Middle school is really tough.
Middle school.
That was the number
Yeah,
that really kind
right.
of.
So this is the group that really needs that extra time.
So, at the middle school level, again, we don't know the exact number of seats that are available for return from remote to in-person.
Off the top of my head.
We don't know.
But right, but it's not significant.
Okay, but we could know, but we just don't know right now. So, has there been thought given to also creating additional space at the middle school level for, to bring back students?
Yes, so we actually talked about that a little bit at, something wrong?
Nope.
We actually talked about that a little bit ago. Remember, I know Principal McPhee and Principal Parks had both identified a struggling group of students. It wasn't a significant number, but like these are students that really needed some in-person time. So they had looked at other spaces in the building that aren't currently being utilized under our model, where we only have the half-day. I know like McCarthy was looking at potentially like one of the larger band rooms where they could actually separate, the students much more than even the 6 feet, and allow some kids to be able to come back in who are really struggling and say, go to that room so that they could at least be in school, even though they were attending remotely, if there wasn't room in the classroom, to be able to just kind of be on a schedule and have someone keeping an eye on them. So I know they identified a couple of spaces at McCarthy. Parker had done the same for a limited number of students who are like really, they want to try to re-engage because they're just not academically performing over the first two periods, the first two marking periods.
And what would happen with staffing for that type of model?
So they would have to basically staff it. So let's say I was a struggling student in 7th grade and there wasn't a space in the classroom for me to go into. I mean, the ideal thing would just be to put me in the classroom with this space. If there's not, and I agreed to still come to school and go to the center and basically learn for the day remotely, I would go with my computer, I would log in, I would be remote, and the school would have to assign a staff member to that room to basically monitor the students. So, what we've tried to do at each of our schools is add some building-based substitutes so that, we have a regular person going to the building each day that can, be the same person, so we're not doing a lot of outside contamination with subs moving from building to building. But a sub may watch it. Another staff member who is available during that time. It could be, the principal, the assistant principal, the supervisor of students, para that have to be available, aide available, that would just kind of watch and oversee that room. They wouldn't be doing the instruction because the student would be on the computer participating remotely, but the student would be in a routine of at least coming back to school and kind of engaging with the school until we got to the point where, let's say there was a seat available in the classroom for the student to go in. That would be ideal. But the schools, that's not going to help the whole school. I mean, that's going to help maybe a real high-risk, high-need population of student because we don't have room for, say, 100, right? So that might be your top dozen or 20 or so students who they're really targeting to come in to re-engage in school. There's not the space to bring, we don't have, say, like 5 available classrooms to be able to do that widespread. And honestly, we don't have staff to be able to support that either. They would only be able to do that if they had enough staff to be able to properly monitor the room.
Okay. The other thing that I think is a real big problem with that kind of model at a middle school level is the fact that I don't think any student in that age group would want to be identified as, I'm here being babysat because I'm struggling. So it's identifying a particular group. And I think that's tough, but that's my input to that. And it's not being discussed right now, but if it were to be increasing those numbers of students and you were to create that model, is it something that would be brought to us so that we know that this is happening? I think people's concerns are, from what I'm gathering from the questions, is if we're increasing the number of people that are actually coming into the school, are we going to be notified of this in advance?
I mean, this is something that the schools are looking at right now. So I think if they identify the capacity, and if they have students, the schools are struggling right now because they have students that they know have needs. And if they can identify spaces within the buildings to bring students back, whether it's in the actual classroom or it's in the center, they're struggling with not doing that. So I think as, the schools are able to identify this space, they want to start bringing these students back. I don't know necessarily what kind of communication would go out, because the communication would be between the student themselves and the family. Oftentimes, it's the guidance counselor involved, the principal, assistant principal, whoever is the relationship with the family, trying to speak with and convince the student that it would be to their benefit to come in a couple days a week, or, to start that re-engagement process so that they're not, that much further behind whenever we do start to add more time to the school day.
Okay, but at the middle school level and at the high school level, if you increase the size of the student population by 10, 20, 30, 40, whatever the number of students
Right.
are, is the general population, everybody who's already at school and who's decided to attend in person already, would they receive notice that the number of students is increasing by this much?
I think no. I don't know what communication they would receive. The difference between, say, the high school and the elementary school is that the high school has been fully subscribed since the fall. So you have 8, 10, 12 kids in a class at all times at the elementary school level. Where at the high school, recently, we've had some classes that have had 1, 2, 3, 4 kids in them.
That's correct.
So all we're doing is basically adding up to, say, the 8 or 10, or however many seats actually were in the classroom for the students to be in. So we're not changing the 6-foot distancing. I don't know what we would notify parents to say that now there's going to be 5 students in the class instead of 4. Or, if we were ever going to change the distancing, or if we were going to add like a full section of kids to a class, that would be something we'd have to tell parents about. But if we're just actually increasing bodies, putting students in the open seats, I don't know necessarily what we'd be notifying people about.
Okay, I think the thing is that people folks don't know how many, example, one of my daughters has come home and told me many times she's the only student in the class. And this past week, she's suddenly not the only student in the class. There are quite a few other students in the class, and they're not people she has seen before in cohort A. So, but maybe people she's always seen online remotely and so on, coming back in.
So you're talking about like a mixing of a cohort?
Yeah, that's what happened.
Or from a different cohort, could be that too. So we have received several emails and questions on this.
Well, here's what, I think the high school certainly could put out a message talking about, their plan to return the students and how it's happening. So there could be a global communication. I was getting at, in your second period math class, you wouldn't necessarily get a communication saying you're going from 3 students to 4 students. But, when we talk a little bit later about how the high school is prioritizing bringing kids back,
Yeah.
I absolutely think that they could send just a global communication to the whole school, talking about the tiers of students that they're prioritizing, how they're doing it and why they're doing it, to let people know that this is happening. I was just getting at like the individual class level.
Yeah.
I don't know how we could notify people about that.
So each room has a sign outside the door, right, saying this room has capacity for blank people? Well,
I don't know if it has a sign, but they have basically so many desks that are set up that are within the guidelines.
You only fit so many in there.
I got a sign. So, I just had a question on, the academically struggling students.
Yeah.
How it is that we're defining that, so are we leaving that up to the principal, teachers, guidance counselor to make that decision based on an individual basis?
Yeah, most of it, to be honest with you, is originating from the teacher.
Okay.
Who has flagged the student for like a TAT or like a teacher assistance team.
Okay.
And then the guidance counselor is typically involved, the principal will be involved too. But no, these are students who are really failing basically at this point.
Okay.
Their classes, they're not engaging in school and they're trying to re-engage.
And then, if.
Hey, can I
the-
just interrupt one second?
Sure.
Even on like some of the, the staff, let's say that had elementary level, middle school level, someone who was in class, say Monday, Tuesday, part of cohort A. A lot of staff are initiating, if they know they have a seat in cohort B, to say, listen, Jay is really having trouble here. No one wants this seat in cohort B. Can I please have him come 4 days a week? Because that would be incredibly helpful to him in his learning. So a lot of this is actually coming as recommendations from the actual teacher who's going to benefit from this, and the student's going to benefit from this, up through, say, the guidance counselor, the principal, the assistant principal, having a conversation with the parent about what it would mean. So that's where a lot of this is coming from.
The problem, though, is if that student were to test positive, they could knock out both cohorts.
If that specific student were, yes, if they were in the window where they would affect both, then yes, then they would force a quarantine of both cohorts.
Right. And then the other thing I was going to add is another category
Yeah.
for academically struggling students, but beyond that, maybe students that have been identified as socially or emotionally struggling, to bring, if we have these open spaces or
Right.
seats, that they might be the next category of student that we would consider.
Okay. I can certainly bring that back to the principals, and I wouldn't doubt that some of those students who are not engaged on that front are also academically.
Exactly.
But no, I can definitely see if we have some students that just, socially having a difficulty with this, that they be prioritized to.
Any other questions at the middle school level? Before we go to the high
Well,
school?
Okay, and when you said the general notification out at the high school level, would that also happen at the middle school level?
You know what, yes, if you would like, I have no problem with, once we get through this and we kind of talk about like the tiers of students that they're bringing back, I can work with the principals and we can send out a communication talking about how we're identifying these students that are gonna be coming back, and having a broadcast email to the school so that they know that. But it's not gonna get to the level where every single class, if there's a student added, that there's gonna be a communication.
No,
There would
there's,
just be, like the high school, when we get to it, when we talk about the high school and their priorities,
right,
I can work with Steve to talk about, how they want to actually message that.
right, because I think some of these communications clearly, definitely have gone out to staff and should, because,
Right.
and it's been a while ago. And then other communications, of course, have gone out to certain parents, and this was pretty clear, from a meeting I attended recently, that, certain parents had received
Right.
notices, but then everybody else didn't, and we're just completely
No, no,
surprised.
that I get. I know you mentioned that to me and others have mentioned that to me as well. And it could have been a matter of like the group that was actually being, I don't want to say targeted, but the group that was being identified for the learning was notified that there was this option. If you would like to potentially come back more, let us know, but the whole school may not have been notified.
That's
So I have
correct.
no problem working with the schools and having them just kind of lay out what their plan for doing this is, so that there can be that notification.
Okay.
Anything else at middle school? Okay, it's high school.
Okay, high school, again, this was the area that we do have some additional space. And again, when we're looking at prioritizing either some remote kids trying to come back for a couple days or adding the 4 days, they basically have followed the same kind of tiers that the elementary middle did, where your high needs populations were reached out to first. So that's all of your special ed students, your L students, to try to invite people back. Second was their academically struggling students, and they have a lot of them. Again, now we have a couple of marking periods where students are failing and not performing, and that's a group that, again, the re-engagement piece is gonna be critical. They then kind of had a third tier of early on when we had some new students to the school. So if you had someone that transferred in from another district, or say a school choice student, something along those lines, who we didn't necessarily know if we had space, they were put into remote. So they've reached out to those families to say, now, if we have space, would you like to come in and be a in-person student? So that was kind of a third tier. And then most recently, they decided, again, we've got a short window before our seniors graduate. Let's give our seniors, a lot who also are struggling, an opportunity to re-engage before they graduate. So they've started with the senior class, reaching out to any 12th grader to see if they would like to, if there's room in the classrooms, if they would like to come back and have more in-person time, whether this is going to 2 days a week, or if there's room for them to go 4 days a week, to be able to do that. So that is ongoing. I do know yesterday, they welcomed back their first group. Whoever was gonna be in cohort A came back. They'll be welcoming back some more students in cohort B on Thursday. So that is happening with the 12th grade. What they're doing, I forget the exact number of students that expressed interest, but they're kind of phasing it in, just to make sure that they have sufficient space within the classes for this. And again, I want to be clear, like if you had your daughter had a class that had a couple of kids in it, all they're doing is basically adding the number of kids that would meet the kind of the quota for the room. So if the room only fit 8, 9, or 10 seats, they're not putting in 20. They're just going from the 2 or 3 that were there, or 4, let's say, up to the 8 or 9. And they're gonna do this in phases to make sure that they're not over populating the schedule. After they do the high school students, and they still need a little time to work on that, they said they want to actually target the 9th grade students. To me, that was a little odd, and I said, well, why would you be looking at the 9th grade instead of the 11th grade? And it actually makes a lot of sense when they explained it to me. The 9th grade students are basically in classes by themselves, because the 10th, 11th, and 12th grade have a lot of, like, say, electives together, and you have multi-grade level students in classes, where you don't have 10th, 11th, and 12th grade students taking 9th grade classes. So they have a very good handle on who the actual in-person students for the 9th grade are, how many available seats there are, and if they have capacity to be able to offer additional in-person seats to those 9th grade students. So in the end, after they explained it, it actually really did make a lot of sense. So I think in anticipating even the notice, if they kind of talk about what they're doing, they could also say, eventually coming, we're going to be reaching out to the 9th grade to see if those students might like to come back for some more in-person time. And again, I see them having to do like a staggered approach, very similar to what they're doing with the seniors. But that was kind of the hierarchy that the high school had come up with, to try to target, those open available seats, keeping the 6-foot distancing, how to get them filled, efficiently and effectively to try to make sure kids can come in and get some extra learning time.
I think just the concern was with the 12th graders, it wasn't a consideration that there were juniors in the class and sophomores in the class, and it was just the senior parents who were told.
Right.
And it ended up mixing cohorts. So I just hope going forward that when they do it with the 9th grader, if we bring any students back that may mean a change in the cohorts, that people are informed, because I think many people were taken by surprise.
Yeah, no, and you had mentioned that to me as well, and I will have that follow-up conversation with the high school. I think that's where like a global email to the whole high school community, kind of talking about what they're planning to do and what they intend to do, would at least keep everyone on the same page. I think they directly reached out to the high school seniors because they were going to be impacted. And, your 9th, 10th, and 11th grade kids are now seeing a different kid that they hadn't seen before and are wondering what's happening. So, no, I will work with Steve, and I'll work with the 2 middle school principals to have there be some kind of a school-wide communication that just clarifies, like, these priorities even, and, why they're doing, who they're bringing back, and when. We can certainly do that.
Because I think that's what Maria was referring to.
Yeah, it's also about cohort, it's changing the cohorts, but I've already asked you this question, so I think you have considered it and just go ahead and went and did it anyway. But it did add people in from different cohorts, and at the high school, it impacts different levels. There are students in one class from 3 levels. So, a sophomore may be in a class with juniors and seniors.
Right.
And it's not only seniors who are impacted, it's all of those students and all of those levels. So, yeah, it needs some notification.
Yeah,
I think the intention is good.
Yeah.
I understand why,
Yeah.
it is that we want to bring students in. I think that we have to do a better job of communicating proactively, though.
Absolutely.
So that people are aware that, this is our plan. And they're not caught off guard, and that being staff and students and parents. I think, we've done a great job up until this point. I think we need to continue to make sure that, that we're communicating effectively so that people can make the best decisions for their families.
Yeah.
Maria, you had said something before that I forgot what you said, and I wanted to comment on it. Do you remember what you said?
What were you trying to?
I don't know. You said something that maybe it'll come back to me.
Okay, the comments I've been getting is, okay, if we had a plan all along that this was going to be happening, then I think people were surprised that it was not communicated in advance that this was going to be happening. I don't think anybody in their mind questions that we need students to be face-to-face and in-person in a classroom with teachers and, with other students, especially at the middle school and the high school level. I think the social emotional part of it is really taking an impact on these kids. and very likely elementary as well. But, you know, we've got such constraints there that we can't even really look at it. But in terms of the middle school and the high school, especially at the high school, we have space. So if we have space, the prioritizing of it and all of this is important for people to realize what the plan is and what we're doing. And it has its reasonings.
Right.
But we are mixing cohorts, which is not what we did from the very beginning. And so there's greater risk of exposure and so on. So if I'm notified of it, it may be that for the first few days, you know, we may not want to be real close to students who are introduced into the atmosphere at this point. And so people make choices, people make decisions, and I think
Yeah, no, I know what it was
notification
now
is important.
when you said that. And I have no problem working with the schools on like the global communication. The issue of the cohorts at the high school, though, I just want to kind of touch on that for a second. And I mentioned this to you when we were just talking yesterday. The cohort at the high school was really to just divide the students over the 4 learning days. You know, a cohort at the elementary school means a particular teacher in a particular classroom of students. They stay together the whole time that they're in school. So they come in the morning, they do their morning meeting, they do all their academics together, and they're together in a true, what I consider a cohort. Because if someone in that class, you know, is COVID positive, they've had exposure all day long, you know, that's a true cohort. When you get to the middle school, it's a little less, because again, you see some movement with the kids, particularly 7th and 8th grade. But when you get to the high school, they don't truly have cohorts. Again, it was our way of splitting the school in half, because we couldn't accommodate all the kids on any given day. So a student at the high school is coming in and seeing, say, 4 classes. I believe it's 4 classes now, Linda? 4 classes during the day. So it's 4 different teachers, 4 different groups of kids. They're running a regular schedule where they're rotating around the high school. They're not with the same group of kids at any given time. They're technically with 4 cohorts, if you want to think about it, during the day of exposure. So in my mind, even when like the high school thinks about doing some of these things, I don't think about maintaining the high school cohort structure as significantly as I do with the elementary level. Because the elementary level kids are together for 4 hours during the day. Where at the high school, you've got almost like 4 little mini cohorts, and they're still going through the schedule and they're rotating. So personally, in my opinion, I don't think it's as big of a deal to cross cohorts or whatever you want to call it at the high school level, because it's not a true cohort. And I don't know if I'm explaining that well to you, but it's.
Well, I understand that, but I think actually that poses a greater risk, because what you're doing is you're introducing students to 4 additional classes and so on. And I can understand why we needed to have the discussion about, you know, who's going to be a direct contact,
Right.
a close contact, and who isn't, because that's where we're increasing the greater number of students coming in, which is at the high school level.
Right.
And so you had to have that discussion with us before, you know, doing this plan, because this plan means that there's a greater exposure in all of these potential 4 classes that one child touches, that one student touches. We had to do this, because otherwise a tremendous number of people would be out, potentially. But I think the important thing is that when we had that discussion, then it was with a thought that there's a plan coming for reintroducing more students into in-person learning. And so I think it would be good for it to say that, okay, this is what we're gonna be doing, and here's the plan. And I think we kind of raised this already at this committee by saying we need to know what the plan is. Because when we were having the discussion about changing that definition, somehow the 2 of you talked about, you, Dennis and Dr. Lang, you both said, oh, well, you know, we've been discussing this possibility. And so that started to be discussed a little bit. But the whole entire plan wasn't, and so I think this came as a bit of a surprise, especially at the high school level, because it wasn't fully discussed.
Well, I remember when we talked about the close contact definition and changing that, I remember talking about the fact that if we left the definition the way it was, we're over-identifying close contacts, and
Exactly.
we're quarantining say, 4 classes,
Right.
when we only had to quarantine, say, 1 class or even a group of kids in a class.
Right.
That was gonna potentially, as we add these kids, mean that more kids were gonna be
Right.
negatively impacted or quarantined that didn't have to.
Right.
So yes, I mean, the close contact definition, it didn't change. Our reaction changed, or our response changed, so that we're not necessarily having to send out as many students who were, we were considering close contacts and quarantining, even if they weren't close contacts. Like I said, I have no problem, working with the 2 schools to try to message how this is happening. I think what they're really struggling with is when you have seats in classrooms that aren't filled and not allowing students to come into those seats, is the struggle that they're having, And I think that's what they're
Absolutely.
just trying to identify who, by priority, who are our most neediest students that we could offer those seats to, as we, try to work to increase some
I
of
think
this.
I can distill this down a little bit. I think there's 2 issues, okay? The issue of, bringing in these students, and then the issue of notifying, okay, parents and us. We were getting a lot of questions from staff, why are these kids coming in? I'm like, no, nobody's coming in. I'm like, yes, they are, they're here.
Yeah.
I'm like, what are you talking about? And they're like,
Exactly.
we got 50 students seniors starting on Monday. I had no idea. And I think that for me, I was frustrated, to be honest with you, because I had no idea that this was happening, and I was caught off guard. It wasn't something that I was expecting. I knew that we were moving in that direction. I just didn't expect that it was imminent. And I felt, kind of left out there hanging, without an answer for parents as to what was happening, because I just simply didn't know. So the first thing around the students coming back, I think that, us taking a look at that and filling these seats and doing what we need to do to help kids get back into school, I think that that's important. But the other part is notifying us and notifying families that this was happening, so that we weren't kind of caught off guard by the fact that this was happening, and we just simply didn't know.
Right.
So, and
Because everybody feels that if there are seats available and kids that need them,
Yes.
bring them in. It's just more of the communication part.
Right, and I think that we have to be really, careful about communicating that. I mean, we spent 3 meetings on close contact, and then all of a sudden, these kids are arriving at schools, and we had absolutely no idea. And I don't want to go on about that, but I do think it's important, and I think it's incredibly important. Look, our staff have worked very, very hard, okay? We know that. We hear great things from parents, okay? But we also know that they're tired and they're stressed. Parents are feeling the same way, and I think we have to go above and beyond to be communicating, to be transparent, and to do everything that we can to instill a sense of trust and confidence in the decisions that we're making. And I think that sometimes when these things happen, it erodes that. And I think we just have to be careful. I think we have to be careful going forward that we don't do that.
Yep. I think your intentions are correct. I mean, we need to bring them back in person. We all agree with that. I think the communication part.
Speaking of which, now what's the next step? So the next steps are.
So that's what's
what we got to talk
happened
about now,
or
and
happening.
these are things that we
Right.
do need to
And
weigh on.
I think this is the next step that we, as a district, need to be moving in, so your input is welcomed on this one. Again, we don't know what's gonna happen with the Board of Ed. I will watch the meeting, I'll inform you before we go into the weekend, so we can have another follow-up discussion on that, and to see what that's gonna be. But I really see, like 3 kind of distinct ways to get back to more in-person learning in the district going forward. One is relatively easy. One is kind of a natural next step, but it has some logistical issues that we still need to work through. And then a third one, would be eventually a full return to school, and we'll talk about that in a few moments. The first phase that I really, see low logistical impact to try to get going is to add Wednesdays to our schedule on a rotating basis. So we currently have kind of a 3/4 day going on. If we maintain that same 3/4 schedule, but add Wednesdays and rotate it basically by cohorts. So we take a look at which cohort, and I think Linda said it was A, because it's kind of been disproportionately impacted by a snow day and things like that. So in a given week when we implement this, it would be, A, B, B, and the next week we'd go AA, BBB. So it would just be a rotation of the days. We'd again have to communicate clearly so people knew which cohort they were in, which day they were coming. But I think that would be the kind of the quickest and easiest way to go. I did have a conversation with Lauren, the union president, this morning about that. I think she also agrees that that's kind of a natural next step. And we think on this one, again, busing is a minor issue. We just kind of need to give notice. The schedules are there. There's not a lot of implications on staff. It would really just be giving staff like a 2-week, 3-week notice that we're going to implement this so that they could, make sure if they have childcare issues or things like that, that it can be worked with. But I would like to ideally move to this transition, and I think it's a good faith transition even with the state for our argument later around what we're doing is actually effective and it makes sense to be able to say we're actually in school 5 days a week, not 4 days a week. Whether it's half days or full days, is another story, but at least it gets us moving to more 4 days of 5 days of instruction. So I think that would be kind of, for me, phase one. And I think, we would want to try to implement that. If we gave 2 weeks' notice, it would be on March 17th. If we gave 3 weeks' notice, it would be on the 24th. But, personally, that would be like phase one to me, because I know we talked about some phasings. A phase two would be, why don't we go through the 3 phases?
Do you want to go through and then come back and ask?
Can we do that, just to be able to kind of cover the whole thing? Phase two would be, once we're actually in school for those 3/4 days, to extend the day to full-time. To keep the cohorts as is, so if you're in an elementary school and you have 10 or 12 kids in, class with you, you're basically just keeping them through lunch in the afternoon and going back to like a regular schedule. So we're not adding additional kids to the day, right? It's your same class, your same numbers, same exposure on that particular day. It's just going back to a full day. And again, at that point in time, we would keep your cohorts AAA, BB, AA, BBB. You do the rotation of the days because we've only got 5 days and you get the 2 cohorts. I think that would be like a natural second step. This one does have some logistics though, and we still obviously would need to work it through. I think we would, I targeted the early April for some consideration on this, which ironically, I didn't know the governor was then gonna, or the commissioner was gonna say something else. But if this was like an April, 5th kind of target date, the issues we have to just think about, we have to work with staff and we have to work with the building admin on, is if we brought people back for the full day, we would almost inevitably have to implement a regular schedule. Because right now, we have specialists and all available hands on deck during the 4 hours of instructional time during the morning. So we would have to be able to go back to more of like the, not when I say rotating, not like the high school schedule, but having, your specialists be broken up during the day, providing the instruction so that teachers get lunch and preps and things along those lines. So there are some logistical issues, the biggest being, particularly at the elementary school level, we'd be losing the second adult in a classroom. So oftentimes those specialists have been serving as like a second adult in the class. So we need to just engage in the schools in conversations around what this would look like. Because the specialists obviously would be teaching their own classes at the same time. They wouldn't be able to be the second adult in the class. Obviously then there were just some scheduling issues around, lunch and breaks and things along those lines. It's nice that we're kind of getting into April by the time that we're thinking about this, because I think as we get close to April vacation and even come back from April vacation, we might be able to use outside spaces more than we're using now. So if the weather gets a little better, you could potentially have some breaks outside, you could have lunches outside, things along those lines. But I think this is kind of a natural second step. And that would be something that we don't necessarily have to put a date on tonight, but I would think we'd be wanting to target towards early April. And ideally, you probably want to do it for a week or 2 weeks before April vacation, so you can kind of work out the kinks if there were any over that break. And then kind of a third phase eventually is, again, the full return to school. So this would be, you'd have the regular schedule going, but now you'd be introducing like a full group of students into the classrooms. And again, this is where we're going to have to get at some point. I think this only works for us, and I just want to throw that caveat on there, that we would not be able to have 6-foot distancing for the students. You could potentially have distancing for staff. I see this coming into place, and I think the staff would feel much more comfortable if they do get the vaccine. I think that's certainly an element. If we have the pool testing going, and that would be going by mid-March, You know, even like for more people in the buildings, like our HVAC work is all winding down at this point. You know, by the end of March, all our balancing is gonna be done. We're gonna be like fully optimal on our systems. Everything is kind of lining up for, you know, any time after April, being able to do this. But I would likely say we look at that kind of what we're gonna call a full return. I'm gonna spend some time with different people looking at classroom configurations. I know, just as an example, Tingsboro decided to go back full-time in person, and they were able to do it with a 6-foot distance width and a 4-foot distance front to back. Instead of the 6 and 6, they do 6 and 4, and they were able to get all the kids into their classrooms. So there might be combinations of distancing we're able to maintain. I'm gonna do some work on that with the staffs over the next couple of weeks. But I see, you know, at this point, I just want to flag for you, we can't do it keeping 6-foot distancing. So we would have to be having that be renegotiated, as well as, I think the vaccine is gonna be important for staff to feel comfortable. But I really don't see any reason, once staff have availability and access to the vaccine, this has to be the direction we start to move in if we're gonna return more fully to school. And again, just for a viewing audience or whatever, this would not be a before April school vacation. This would be like an after April school vacation at some point, ideally this spring, is what we should be looking for, to get some kind of normalcy back in before the end of the school year. But I don't have a definitive date on this. I just see this as the third phase when we get there.
This is what the governor is proposing for
This is what he would be proposing for April 5th.
5th, right?
Yeah.
So,
When I think we're more likely to be at phase 2 on April 5th. And again, when you talk about even like the political argument, I think we'd make a really strong argument if we could get to phase 2 on April 5th and be able to say, hey, listen, we're here. Our teachers just got vaccinated. We're more like maybe a month away after April vacation for kind of doing phase 3. But at least it would be, you know, we could make that argument that we're in phases. We have some logic behind this.
It's not
This is-
arbitrary.
Right.
Like a date on the calendar we pick.
Right. You know? So, and I wanted to kind of put pen to paper and show you like, you know, some of these thoughts and plans, but these are kind of the 3 distinct phases that I see kind of getting us back to where we need to go.
why don't we go to phase 1 first, see if there's any questions, kind of work our way through. And Don?
I have a quick question. How will that affect the cleaning? Would you just do the second half of the day? The
Yeah,
fogging
so
and all
what
that?
we ended up- oh, let me come back over here. What we ended up doing with the cleaning contract is they're basically providing manpower and hours. So if it was a cohort week, we'd shift and just have them come in second shift on the Wednesday.
Okay.
So they would just do their extra cleaning then.
Okay.
We'll just have to, Brian will have to coordinate. So if it was a B cohort week, obviously after Tuesday, they'd come in Tuesday night and do all their extra cleaning on the overnight, so that Wednesday cohort
It
B
would be
goes
clean.
in.
Yep.
So, and they honestly have it down to a science now. They don't need a whole day to do that cleaning.
Okay.
We can do it second shift.
Okay.
Other questions on phase 1? Donna, do you have one earlier? Oh, sorry, Jeff.
And the idea is that we will try to balance the days that were lost.
Yeah, I mean, we're gonna take, and I think it's A, that was
Yeah, A, good.
Yeah.
impacted. I wouldn't wanna, because people are gonna be anxious about this too.
Right.
I wouldn't wanna come out and do like A for 3 weeks. I think let's just give them the first week to kind of, if it is A, just to kind of let them get a day caught up. We only had 1 snow day.
Okay.
We had a power outage day at Byam. But that affected the one school. It didn't affect the district. And I think it's just A that's off a day, right?
They're off day, but then there's the Monday holidays.
Oh, the Monday holidays too, yeah. We'll take a peek at it. But we'll try to do something so that like proportionally, everyone gets the same amount of in-person days. And we will have to clearly communicate that just to make sure that people are on the right schedule.
Other questions on phase 1, Donna?
I do think it's important that we work with the union, because some parents are gonna need childcare, and I don't think that childcare is as available right now as it would be if it was a not COVID situation. So, you know, people may be struggling or scrambling to try and find childcare.
Childcare for the
For their own
parents?
children.
For the teachers'
Teachers.
children.
Oh, no, teachers' kids, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just to make sure that, you know, like I said, I think it's gonna take them a little bit of time to find childcare. I'm not sure that even 2 weeks is enough time, to be perfectly honest with you. I just don't know what's available. I know a lot of people just couldn't maintain, you know, their daycare services because of COVID, and they just shut down, so.
I was going to ask a similar question in terms of, does this require any renegotiation with the union? Is there any, like when we said the model is this, is
Right. No, just from a negotiating standpoint, what this would do is if we pick the date, let's say it was the 17th, the 24th, we would just kind of, and I've already talked to the union about this, we had a very good conversation today. It's more just giving the staff notice for this particular phase. But we would just kind of put them on notice that this is our intent. And, we would engage in a conversation to figure out if there are logistical issues that need to be worked through, how many people it affects, and, try to come up with some compromises to move this forward.
The other thing, I'm sorry.
I think John had a question.
Why, and this is just, I'm trying to get your thought process here.
Yeah.
Why not, instead of adding the third day, like, why not just extend a day? Is it a staffing issue?
Yeah.
Okay.
There are a lot more logistics because the schedule has to change.
Right.
Because right now, the specialists are providing a lot of asynchronous instruction after lunch period, like, so all the kids are going home for lunch. And then if you're a music teacher, you might be just teaching, say, one class in front of you, but you've pre-recorded lessons for all the other ones.
For remote,
But that music teacher now needs to be teaching all blocks during the day.
Right.
To free up the different grade level teams. So that is gonna be a little bit more work that's involved.
Okay.
The quickest and easiest really is adding the Wednesday, just because it's the same schedule that's already in place. We already have the transportation. We already have the staffing model, so the specialists will still support during the day. It is just logistically tougher when we get to phase two.
Okay.
So that you just said is true for elementary and middle school.
Correct.
It's not true for the high school. So is this phasing approach here, first of all, I think a lot of people really want the Wednesday and
Yep.
want to increase it to the Wednesday. So I think, from the parental point of view and from, the student point of view, there's no loss there. That would be
Right.
terrific. But when it comes to the high school and you don't have the staffing issue,
Correct.
all right, then, increasing it, the only problem is the lunch there. Is that
Correct.
what it is?
Yeah, so you are correct. The high school, they're already on a rotating schedule.
Uh-huh.
And they're true rotating, so that they're seeing their classes during the day. The high school technically could move to just a full day,
Right.
much easier than the other schools because they're already working the schedule. The lunch period just does become the issue, and we would just have to kind of figure out how to configure the space for that. In my just opinion, to keep the spacing and whatnot, if the committee really wanted to explore having the high school go more full-time first, we certainly could. I think it'll be a little bit easier as we get to like April and the weather gets a little bit better, even if we were to allow some, they don't typically do it, but if they were to allow some outdoor, seating and things like that for the lunch periods, I think people would feel a little bit more comfortable. As it is now, they're in class for everything except their last period of the day. They're going home for lunch and they're just having one online class. And now they're actually rotating the schedule, so it's not the same class either.
That's correct.
So it's a little bit of a, it's a mix. It's not like they're significantly losing out on something because their class is rotating. It's not like math every day is the remote period, you know what I mean? It might just be one in a cycle. But I mean, if there was a real desire from the committee to have the high school go more full-time sooner, we certainly could. The high school could do it. The elementary and the middle couldn't.
Yeah, Donna?
I'm just tossing out some issues here. We haven't talked about transportation.
Yep.
Okay, so, we have, parents who are, driving back and forth to school, Mondays and Tuesdays. Wednesday, maybe they're working from home, but they don't necessarily have to interrupt their workday because they've got to leave to pick up their kids.
Right.
Actually, Wednesday through Friday. Are we gonna do anything about transportation, to be able to increase the number of I know that was another thing, another guideline that came, but,
Right.
Some parents, their own work schedules may be impacted by having students return on Wednesdays, because now they've got to add in that transportation piece that they didn't have before.
Yeah, well, I had not planned on doing that, only because we're down to like a mile at this point as far as the ridership goes. And to upload another group of students for potential ridership, and then to change models like every 2 or 3 weeks, we'd be putting a lot into like redoing routes and everything like that. If a couple weeks later, it's gonna change. Capacity-wise, if we were to do that, I mean, this maintains the practices we've already had on the buses. I don't know if we're now gonna start adding a lot of new riders and things like that. Is that gonna, I'll look into anything you want me to look into, but is that gonna throw another set of variables that people are uncomfortable with as far as, more kids on buses and the ventilation and things along those
Sure,
lines.
and I just think it's something that we have to think about, that's all, as we're making these decisions. The other thing is if, let's say a parent had a work schedule now, on, they were working on Wednesdays, could their child remain remote on Wednesdays if they couldn't get them to school?
I can't, huh?
It's complicated.
Yeah. No, the whole thing is tough, because, I think it's tough on the teachers, as you know.
Sure,
If
absolutely.
on a given day, a
Yep.
child just decides to stay
Yep.
remote.
Yep.
Can I prohibit it? No, but I certainly wouldn't encourage it, just because I do think it throws off the planning
Yep.
for what the teacher has put into for that particular day. It always comes around to, we're still telling people if they don't feel well, don't come to school, stay home, be safe and whatnot. So it happens, but it wouldn't be something I promote, because I think, again, we just have to start to kind of work back to getting back to more full-time in person.
Sure.
So, question on the transportation.
Yep.
The guidelines were updated February 11th, right? So
Correct.
there's more options, okay.
But I want to be clear, I have not changed anything on the transportation,
You have not.
even though
But-
they updated the guidelines, correct?
Okay, but if we add in phase two,
Well, phase two still doesn't change it because it's the same kids, they're just staying for longer,
okay.
right? Phase three is when you have to do that.
Okay, and adding in the students that you are adding in, right now.
We had capacity. It
You have
doesn't- it
enough
doesn't affect,
capacity.
right.
Okay, great.
All right, other questions on phase one? You want to,
Yeah, do you have a feeling,
do we want to
on a date?
vote or take a motion on starting phase one in a certain time frame? Are people comfortable with
I guess the question is, what date are you comfortable with? Because you're the one that has to implement it.
17th?
The earliest I would do it, because I'd want to give staff 2 weeks. So the earliest I would do it is the 17th. I think if you wanted to be extra generous, you could do the 24th. But I really think if you don't pick a date, then it's just going to be inevitable. It keeps getting pushed.
I'd like to push it out, especially since we could be so close to having teachers vaccinated by that point.
24th then?
I don't have a problem with that. The only thing I do want to be clear, though, is this is no more exposure, even like for teachers that are watching.
I know.
Because they already have these same kids in front of them.
I just feel better.
No, I know, but I'm just saying it's not like we're introducing another
I
set of
understand.
kids.
I'm just,
Yeah, but I would say.
actually, I was thinking about it more for the next phase. So that, now that we've, because potentially, I know we're thinking about starting at the beginning of April, but this would just gives maybe a little extra cushion, 1 week of a cushion to make sure that maybe everybody can be vaccinated before we hit that next phase.
It's also going to impact people in terms of not only childcare and so on for the staff, it's also arrangements people have made about their own students and coverage for their students, and, they're paying people to sometimes be home with them, doing remote work and so on. So the impact is, people are gonna have to make some changes. And then, I think once they commit, the whole problem at the high school created by not enough people coming in that committed to being hybrid and instead each day decide to stay home and be remote. I think we've got to stick to our policies, and they have been extremely accommodating during these COVID times. But I think we need to say to students, if you've committed, then you've committed.
So, but my only point was, I think the earliest I would want to do it the 17th, because you got to give at least 2 weeks' notice. And the latest I would really want to do is the 24th, or it just starts to bump into phase two.
24th, I would.
So Donna, you want to make a motion? You want me to make it?
Go, Dennis.
I move that we increase in-person learning opportunities on Wednesdays on a rotating in-person basis between cohorts starting on March 24th.
Second.
You're second, okay, you got it. So Donna seconded.
Seem right? Okay. Okay, so we have a motion, a second. All right, okay, any further comments or questions? All right, all in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? Okay, so 5-0 on phase one. Okay, moving on to phase two. Any questions about phase two? I know there's a lot of moving parts in that one.
I want to just make a comment that there there are a lot of moving parts on that one, and there's probably a lot of questions, but I think you probably have a lot of stuff to figure out.
Yeah, no, and this is one that I just wanted to flag for you, that I think, in an ideal world, we would probably start, 2 weeks before April vacation, so that we could try it, we could flush through any of the issues, we could have that week to be able to modify as needed, and put us in a good light for eventually working through the schedules to be able to get to phase 3. So I don't think you have to make a decision personally tonight on a date to implement this, but I think as long as in your mind, it wouldn't be before the first week in April. I can be working with staff to kind of have like that, it might be the 5th, actually, ironically. Yeah, I
We're
mean, the
not
5th
meeting
would be 2 weeks before April vacation. I, in my mind, could be kind of like working toward that and looking at the logistics with the staff around schedules and all that, having the dialogue with the union. And then I can bring you an update at the next school committee meeting, just to kind of let you know where we're at process-wise. A lot of this work is already ongoing. I don't want you to think we're starting from scratch, but I can at least report out like how comfortable we would be at that point about entertaining a date, and we may have a better indication about vaccinations too, by that point in time. And we'll have a frame with whatever happens at the board meeting on Friday.
Jeff?
So that would mean, like, one cohort would be in 3 full days, 1 week, and then the other the next.
Yeah, so the only difference would be like if we switch to add the Wednesdays, right? And let's just say that first week we do the 3 days of A. So we do AAA, BB. When we were to go to phase 2, that same group, AAA, would just stay for the full day. So it would be the limited number of kids, but it would just be a full day program instead of a half day program.
So is everybody okay with the general concept?
Yeah.
Okay, are there questions that you would like answered now, or the superintendent, investigate for our next meeting?
I think I need time with
Yeah.
this.
Yeah, I agree. But there are
Do you have
some
questions
things-
now? So
Yes.
you-
Yeah,
And
some
some
things.
more input, yeah.
Yeah, I'd like some more information on how we're gonna handle lunch.
Yeah.
Lunch, what that's gonna look like, and.
Yeah.
This is vastly
Staffing.
more complicated
I
than
think-
Right, that's what I'm saying. If you ask
Yeah,
questions
give
now,
them
maybe we
time
can
to-
have answers for the
The
next meeting.
lunch, the other question I would have is what kind of PPE would be offered to non-vaccinated staff if they're having lunch in the classroom? Because they may want something different from what they've got now. The other thing I would really like to understand is what happens with specialists and how the staffing would happen.
Would they just be going back to like the regular schedule that they would run
Yeah.
during a regular year?
Okay.
Other questions? Donna, you had a question, or a deeper
No,
thought?
actually, the other reason I think I liked it, I'm just going back for a second, to the 24th, is I think once you get the vaccine, it takes a couple of weeks before you kind of reach capacity.
2 weeks.
2 weeks.
Yeah.
So I think that also gives us a little bit of a cushion. And also, hopefully at that point, everybody will have been vaccinated and maybe over whatever side effects they may have, as a result of the second dose. So I do like that we're pushing this into April, into early April, and, taking a look at it that way, so, because I do think it gives us a little bit of time, but it also gives us a little bit of time with the vaccines.
Other questions?
I think also on phase 2, there may be a difference between how it works at elementary and middle school with these specialists, so I'd like to really try to understand that when you present it.
Yeah, some specialists may not even be able to come online anyway, like band or chorus or stuff like that, right?
Right.
Because they still
It
have,
would be no different than what the high school's doing now.
okay.
Like the high school really truly,
It's not the
It'd
high
be-
school, it's the middle school. As I said, there might be a difference between how the specialists are.
no, I know, but I was just saying like the high school already has band and they've figured out what they do with it.
Okay.
So it would just be really,
Ah,
and a lot
good.
of them actually
Yeah.
go to both schools, so it would just be having those conversations
Mhm.
about what it's gonna look like.
I guess my question would be, so right now the teachers have an extra adult in the classroom, so they're not gonna have that person,
Right.
so it's just gonna, they're gonna just have to take on both.
Well, yeah, but that's also what I'll be able to do is talk to the staff about, exactly what kind of impact that's gonna be.
Right.
If we have limited extra adults, like where would they be targeted? No, phase 2 is complicated, but we do have to kind of work through phase 2 because that's our like first step to the regular schedule. which we're gonna need for phase three. Phase three is basically done, with the exception of just adding the students back in. We're gonna be working through phase two is gonna be the hardest. We're gonna be working through all the logistics of almost getting back to a normal schedule, with all of these extra confines, or constraints.
Yeah. All right, so any other questions? So we'll look for an updated report on
Yeah,
phase
so
two.
we'll talk about phase
Next
two,
meeting.
and, obviously, in the context too of what happens Friday,
Right.
with the board. So there's a lot of moving parts. But I just think for the viewing audience, we wouldn't be thinking about this until April.
And phase three down the line from there.
Phase three would be after April vacation and vaccine permitted and, whatnot. But, just to set expectations, phase three and more of a full return, that does require the reduction of the 6-foot spacing. There's no other way of doing it. And, again, that's something we are gonna have to work with the union on.
Again,
You
this
have a question? I do too.
I don't have a question, I just have a comment. So I'm glad that we are, forming, a path back to school. I fully support getting kids back into the school safely as possible with the minimum amount of disruption. So I like the phase approach, and I'm looking forward to seeing more details on it. But just generally speaking, as vaccines come out, and I think we've gotten pretty smart at being clean and making sure the kids, the kids and staff are safe. So the more face-to-face time we can give kids safely, the better. So thank you for putting this together.
Okay, so my question is, as we move into phase two, there may be parents who don't want their child to remain hybrid or in school, in person, and they want to move to fully remote. Is that option going to be available to parents to switch if that's what they choose?
I'll explore that when I do the report out for phase two. Off the top of my head, I would say, yes, we probably have to have some kind of an option. However, we may not be able to guarantee, the same class, the same teacher, things like that, depending on the numbers. We may have to be moving things around at that point. So let me address that when we put a little report together for phase two.
All right, so before we set a date and so on, would it be advisable to survey and see how many people would want to move to fully remote if that were to happen?
I don't think we can until we actually lay out, the plan for people to even know, what they would be voting on. But let's wait and see what actually happens Friday, because again, that's gonna provide some context for what we have to work within. But I would think, before we move to phase two, if we were gonna give parents that opportunity, yes, we'd wanna survey or get the commitment from them. But that's also gonna impact our staffing. So that's where staffing might become
Okay,
questionable too. So I need some time to think about that one.
all right, so we have one more meeting between, our next
Yeah, but
meeting
we
is
can
the
always have
16th,
we
right?
can always have an extra meeting if we had to
Okay.
talk specifically
All
about
right.
something.
Thank you.
Other questions? Hope Friday's meeting
Yeah,
isn't
it'll
too
be,
extreme.
it'll be interesting.
No, it'll be interesting.
Is it public?
It's, they actually, what do you call it, live stream it? So
You said
can
it was
watch
Friday, right?
Friday.
I looked on the DESI website, and it didn't have a meeting scheduled for Friday, but
It's the Board of Ed.
Yep.
I'll try to find the link for you.
if you can, I'd love
Yeah,
to.
I'll shoot
I'm
it.
gonna jump onto that, thank you.
Just help your blood pressure.
Yeah.
Really?
Can you see me yelling at Commissioner Riley from my
Behave,
house?
please, behave.
Make sure your mic's
We'll have
on.
an
You
intervention.
can't hear me, it's
Yeah,
fine.
very good. All right, so any other last things on the different
No.
models? Okay. All right, so last thing we have is a personnel report.
Yes, the HR office just provided you the copy of the personnel report for the month of January. Again, just detailing the hirings, and I don't think we had any retirements. Yeah, we had a few new hires, number of paraprofessionals to help out in the different buildings, which would be great. A couple of resignations, and then we had a few assignment changes. Didn't have any retirements in January, so just sharing that as information for you.
Any questions on the report?
If you could just remind us, because I don't remember from last year, when is it that we get notified in this personnel report about retirements?
Well, they list the retirements each month if someone retires. Typically, people don't retire until June. So, I mean, like the June and July ones are the big lists of retirements.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean, there's nothing stopping someone from retiring mid-year, it just doesn't happen often.
No,
But the-
no, I understand, but I think we had a meeting here where you said we're probably gonna have, is it 15 or 16 retirements?
Right.
So we already have an idea that we have certain positions that are retiring.
Well, yes, no, we have an idea, it's just they're not gonna appear on the report until June when they actually retire.
Okay.
Because most of them are retiring at the end of the year,
All
the end
right.
of the school year.
We know who they are, so we can start to fill the positions.
But we've already started the hiring process.
Okay.
Yeah, but they just won't appear on the report until then.
Okay, other questions on personnel? Okay, any liaison reports? I know some, okay, Jeff?
At the high school, PTO met last night, and the majority of the discussion had to do with how to celebrate the seniors. And unsure of, what will be happening in the spring, et cetera. They were brainstorming a lot of ideas of how to celebrate the students outside or in some way or some fashion. And that's pretty much what they've been pretty much working on now. And they had some ideas that they were throwing around. They're just gonna check with Steve and the administration and see what could work.
Now, with the new relaxed guidelines with gatherings, is graduation looking like more of a possibility, or?
Yeah, I mean, I do see there being some graduation in some shape or fashion. I don't know that we're gonna be at the Songus still at that point because of the indoor size constraints and stuff. I know the high school has reached out to a couple of other venues as possibilities. I don't want to say the names, but, they are looking into it. And then I think, we had spec'd out basically the stadium to use last spring if we had to. So I think, that's another viable option. So the high school is definitely gearing up for a graduation of some sort. I just don't know the logistics and exactly where, but, I would have to guess it would likely be outdoors as opposed to indoors. I just don't know if we're going to be at that point yet. But they are working on that. I think, like say the prom is a little bit more difficult and, some of the other senior activities, but they are trying to put together a good number of senior activities for the students.
Any other liaison reports? Donna?
The bottle and can drive for the Chelmsford Friends of Music is on March 13th. I think they want you to separate your glass and cans, so you can double check their Facebook page to just make sure I got that straight. And as I mentioned earlier in the meeting, I was at the South Row PTO meeting. They're working hard to make sure that they have as many activities in place as they possibly can for the kids, trying to, make things enjoyable. And we're having a dance coming up sometime in March, so that'll be interesting, so. A Zoom dance, I think.
Really?
Yeah, so, the challenge has been issued, so don't forget to put your walking shoes on. What shoes? Walking.
Yeah, what is part of
kind
this
of
challenge?
shoes? The challenge, the family fitness challenge.
Jumping, send me the info.
What is involved?
So I'll have Jason actually send out the Google
Yeah, I was
Forms
gonna
to
say.
you. But, so each school is, the elementary school is, it's a challenge that they have to see who can get the most minutes of
Oh, so
activity in.
you're monitoring your walking and stuff like that?
Yeah, that's what, and.
Does golfing count?
I guess so.
Okay.
All right, I'm on Team Center School now then.
Yeah, and you're with me at South Row.
With South Row.
Yeah, we have Harrington and Byam.
All right.
Well, what about Parker? I have two.
No, it's on
No, it's
elementary
just
school.
elementary.
Oh, good, I'm buying
Just
then.
the elementary.
Don't make this hard on me.
And
I'll take by him.
Chips isn't involved, so I was a free agent.
Any other liaison
Yes.
reports?
Wellness Committee, we met again. Remember, this is the year we're going through the policy. And we have an assignment now to rewrite certain sections of the policy. And we met with our coach. March 3rd, that's tomorrow night, is Harrington PTO. March 4th is EL Council. And the library has 2 guest speakers at EL Council.
Anybody else? Any new items? I just want to remind people, we have a joint meeting on the 8th with Select Board, 6 o'clock virtual meeting.
6 o'clock, right?
Yeah, 6 o'clock, a Zoom link.
Okay.
You got another thing?
It's a question, I just don't remember the name of the event, and I wanted to mention it. The high school Lyme, they ran the event. It was this week. It's a fundraiser. They did it for Project Bread. And it was successful. I think they had, it was all done remotely. It's like a talent show. What's it called?
I know,
I'm forgetting it, but it was really good. And they had quite a few students participating and staff. And they raised, I think, $700 for Project Bread, but they can correct me.
I can't remember the name of it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm forgetting it.
And
I'm
one
so bad
last
at
new
names.
item, one question mainly for Assistant Superintendent. The parent meeting on the standards-based report cards is what date? Because we had a
March 31st.
In tune.
March 30th,
March 31st.
31st, okay. We just had an email asking about the date, so.
Apparently, my wife and I had already started the fitness challenge yesterday, and I didn't know, but we're doing really well. So who knew? So go team, buy 'em.
It's called In
I guess I
Tune.
started today, so.
Oh, in tune?
In Tune. Yep.
Okay.
All right, anything else? Okay, I will take a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
I second your motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, thank you. 10 o'clock.